That's okay. It's okay. Huh? Nah, it's all right. I'll be okay. The sign.
2025 City Council Budget Work Session. We have invocation from Dr. Wilder.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for Lynchburg City Council. We thank you for our citizens, our taxpayers, our staff members, our city council members that come to make decisions about our community. Give us the wisdom and the guidance to do what's best for our community, best for our constituents, best for the children and the families that we serve. Bless our staff for the work they've doing to put this budget together. Just give them strength and patience and guidance in working with all of us as we have so many items that we need done in this community. Continue to give us the wisdom and guidance. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Now, that's everyone stand for the pledge. We don't have a flag, but we can pledge. I got one right here. Look at me. We're all looking at you. All right. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
call a point of order. I'd like to ask the city attorney, about the sign over there. I would like it to be removed because it is unnecessary, and I feel like it's starting this work session with kind of a hostile tone. It's an attack on our city manager. We're about to have a discussion. If anybody in here has something negative to say about the budget, they can say it. But, you know, there's a presentation that's about to be made by the city manager, and it's a direct attack on the budget that he's presenting, and there's no need for that. It's a distraction to the room. It's a distraction and attack on the city manager himself, and I would like it to be removed out of the courtesy for the staff.
So, Mr. Mayor, as you know, council members aren't permitted to engage in behavior that intimidates others, to engage in behavior that would disrupt the ongoing or the functionality of a particular meeting. So certainly if you believe the sign that is presented there, is particularly if what's shown on it would be intimidating, or distract from the purpose of the meeting, I think you could instruct that it be taken down.
Mr. Missions, could you put your scale,
The graph? You want
the
me to put the
graph?
up?
Yes, and remove that, please.
And just want to point out that facts are facts. This
Yes.
is the largest proposed tax increase since fiscal year 1998. That's a
Thank-
fact. That's
thank
not
you.
an attack.
Thank you,
So just so we can be clear about that, but there we go.
thank you.
We can also put that one up there.
Budget work section agenda. FY '26 budget work section. I now turn you over to my city manager.
All right, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, we missed May the 4th be with you. We missed Cinco de Mayo, we're not here on May 6th. So we missed some fun days to have some fun things to say. I do want to call to attention, and I just want to congratulate each one of us for opening up the playground. And just what a wonderful partnership that was with Kiwanis, and that I think that once it got dark out, they got the kids off the playground, I think. I don't know whether or not, mine was still there. But nevertheless, I just want to congratulate each one of you on that opportunity, that public-private partnership, and we continue to see the amphitheater and its growth and what have you, and just how the city's moving forward. I'm just tickled, if not proud, if I can be, of those things that we've done together. Today, opportunity throughout, each one of you have asked some questions, right? We had a couple of public hearings last week. I don't know if did we go over into the next day? I can't remember. We go into the next day. But there was, there were some things that were brought up there, and then subsequent to that each one of you have posed. And I wanted, if anything, to make sure that we had time today. It's a work session. And I have Donna and I have Greg here with you to kind of go over an overview about those questions that you've posed. And so, Mr. Mayor, if you're okay, go ahead and turn it over to Greg and to Donna.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. City Council, we have a number of items today. There have been a lot of questions that have come in between now and the public hearing. On slide number 2, Mitch, there we go. An overview here of what we will cover as it relates to the budget. First, some structure inventory follow-up questions from Mr. Deemer. Dr. Wilder asked a couple of questions around the cost of the new police headquarters and fire station that we're building in partnership with Liberty University. Also asked about police and schools funding over the course of the last 10 years. Wanted to walk through, there's been some questions on department submissions and where that information is located. Wanted to provide some information there. Then Councilman Mischins asked about radio funding for the fire department, so we'll go through that at that point. Councilman Feraldi and maybe one other of you asked about, in particular, it was lodging tax and I believe the personal property tax, car tax. We've gone ahead and included most of the taxes, the tax levers that council has at their disposal that will show both the rate and, of course, the value of an incremental change, either up or down. Donna will run through some financial management policies and fund balance. We'll go through the fiscal year 2024 year end. I know there's been some questions on where we ended and a surplus and some conversation around the definition of surplus. Ultimately, we'll then look at the FY 2026 proposed budget, real property tax equalization, and then we'll take a look at the city's level of federal funding across all of our funds. I think there's been a lot of concern. The state, I think, has set aside some funds in preparation for potential federal funding cuts. So we just wanted to review with council what federal funding we have in our budget as we look forward to the coming budget discussion. So first, we are going to start with Vice Mayor Deemer's questions on the structure inventory update. First question was, did this presentation include buildings outside the city that the city owns? The answer to that question is yes, Vice Mayor. If you look at the table up there, the general fund owns about 180 structures. There are a few in Campbell County. The fire training facility and the NPD firing range, both are in Campbell County and were included in the inventory. The water, sewer, and storm water systems own a total of 80 buildings. 5 of those are structures, 5 of those are outside of the city limits. We have structures in Amherst, Bedford, and Campbell County. So with the Pedler Reservoir in Amherst, in Bedford, we have the Abear water filtration plant and water pump station. And then in Campbell County, we have water tanks on Wingate and on Leesville Road. And then, of course, the airport, there are 29 structures on the airport. All of them are in Campbell County. But all of those were included in the structure inventory presentation that we reviewed. Next slide, Mitch. The next question, Vice Mayor Deemer, were around structures that were listed as other. And again, in the general fund, we broke this down by conditioned and non-conditioned structures. Of the non-conditioned structures, we have 4 that were listed as other. 2 of those were greenhouses. One that's located at 300 Rutherford Street, they're both located at 300 Rutherford Street and have been until recently leased out. The other 2 structures are the fire training facilities. There's, I believe, 2 structures there that we listed as other. Next slide. Also listed as other in our conditioned buildings were the 4 facilities you see here. The Kemper Street Station, this is the Amtrak train station. The Allen Morrison Building, to call it conditioned is probably a little bit optimistic. We use it as storage for our Parks and Rec equipment. And then the Municipal Federal Credit Union near the Bank of the James Stadium and the aviary. So those are the structures that were listed as other in the presentation. The last slide on this section, there you go, Mitch, is on vacant and underutilized facilities. What was the methodology to determine if a building was considered vacant or underutilized? First and foremost, if the building is vacant or will be in the next 12 months, we considered it underutilized. So you've got 4 of them that meet that criteria there, which is the old Meanwhile Back at the Farm, 805 Court Street, which police is coming out of, the building that we discussed on Lakeside Drive, and then, of course, Op House on Jackson Street. And Vice Mayor, you'll be interested to know, I had a conversation about the RFP that we're putting out to dispose of 517 Jackson Street, so we are moving forward with that. I had that meeting earlier this week, so we're making progress there. Some of the other criteria that we used, really, we took a look at just, is there excess space that's not being utilized by personnel, storage, or other operational needs? I can tell you one of the things that really helped us in this consideration is there was a small unit that we were looking at potentially relocating from downtown into other city office space. There's about 9 employees there. And quite frankly, we ran through just about any potential office building we could find to see if A, there was appropriate space, so it had to match the needs, but moreover, was there a space to just transfer a small unit into? And there really wasn't out there. I think, so those are some of the criteria that we used. Interestingly, over the past 5 years, we asked Public Works the underutilized question. One of the things they told us, which I thought was interesting, is over the last 5 years, there have been 24 instances or 24 spaces within the city where we've actually added partitions to create more office or cube space. I think the vice mayor and I toured the social services building yesterday, and I didn't even realize it at the time, but some of those areas where we had the central cubes that looked pretty, like they were pretty tight fit, we've created those within the last 5 years. So that's some of the criteria we used. I think we're, outside of the facilities you see up there, we're utilizing our office space at least pretty efficiently at this point in time. And that's all that I have on that topic. So any questions or thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your time too at doing that. We did find 15 offices that were empty, but I think that building is fully utilized in my mind. I had a different memory from the first visit, but it looks like to me it's being properly done, and I appreciate your time doing it. Could I get a copy of the actual? The map is great, and I love the visual, but there's a lot of dots on top of dots, and they're clustered together, and I can't get a sense how deep that dot pile goes. So if I could get a
Like a
list of that.
list?
Spreadsheet, that would really be helpful for me. I would appreciate that. Thank you. That's it.
Anyone else? Mr. Mission?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question about that, Mr. Patrick. So, like, I noticed you've got the 3813 Old Forest Road on there. That structure is going to be right in the path of the one-way pairs, correct?
It is.
So, when we have, there's going to be times when we acquire property like that that's going to be vacant, right? Because we're going to put a highway through it or
Right.
a road or something to that effect.
So ultimately, we'll attempt to rent it out with, until it needs to come down, if there's anyone that would be interested in the space. But to your point, ultimately, when the 501-221 project rolls through, it will be gone.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Wilder did ask what the cost of the new police headquarters currently is and the new fire station. So as of May 1st, the police headquarters cost is $50,357,228. There's still about $2 million left in that budget as they finish with FF&E and also the cost to move, like all the evidence and all of that to move into that building. So we're not finished yet, but that is the cost as of May 1st. The new fire station, Liberty University has estimated an investment of about $8.5 million. Our annual lease payments will be approximately $500,000, and that's just quick math on 30 years of $8.5 million. The SAFER grant, just to make sure that that's not lost here, it ends on or about March 1st, 2028, and that is moving 21 firefighters into the general fund budget from the grant fund, and that's going to cost $1,470,000 plus based on progression pay and equipment and all those things annually. Jake, did you have a question?
I think you might be going to it in the next slide, so I'll wait. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I don't mind. Was there something on this slide?
Well, I know that Mr. Missions has brought this up, and we've discussed it. He handed these CIPs to me, but I am curious how the police station jumped so much in cost from the original projections. So I'm seeing a $15 million increase. I'm not familiar with that history, so I would love to just have a better understanding of that.
When the police department was first put into CIP, maybe 9 years ago, it was an absolute placeholder. And then a company was hired to do design, and a design was done, and then I think it was redesigned a number of times, and then to where we got to today. They did a space study about what was required and all that, and honestly, cost of materials has increased substantially, plus the cost of the FF&E. So
also originally located over on Henry
Right,
Street.
that's
Okay.
And
right.
so it wasn't cited.
Okay.
When I first arrived, that's where it was cited. And to make it work, they would have to buy and help me out, guys, what's the,
Well, they were gonna have to build a parking deck if it were there.
across the street at
Right.
we didn't own that because it's privately held as well. And so it became an opportunity to move out off of Oddfellows, and that's where Genworth had a parcel of land and had enough opportunity to kind of, so it was originally cited when I first arrived at Kemper. They'd done some remediation to kind of, because that was where the old GLTC was. So I think some of the expenses were, I think the siding didn't work. And so we moved to where we are, and that now we can park it, and it works well.
Right,
So-
and about $2 million of that is actually the purchase of that property for where it is now, as opposed to we owned Kemper Street.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So Dr. Wilder also had a question and asked for a comparison of police funding and schools funding from fiscal year 15 through fiscal year 2025. So the police department budget, and this is not looking at animal control, the firing range, or any of that, or the police duty. It's just what's in the police department. And from 15 to 25, it's grown it has grown $10,471,953, which is a 68.9% increase. Whereas the school's operation in that same 10-year period has grown $1,436,208, which is a 3.7% increase. And this is just city funding. And that $1.4 million also includes in adopted 2025, $1 million of that is from their health reserve.
Hey, a couple things going on here. Police department is itemized as the police department. Does that include 599 funding from the state in those numbers?
Yeah, because.
So why are we comparing state dollars and local dollars to just local dollars in this comparison?
I'm not showing the revenue side, this, you could.
And then, if I may, Donna, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sure.
I know
No,
where you're coming from,
absolutely.
but I need to point this out. And then school operations. Now, is that the entire school's budget?
No, that is just the city, what the city gives
Yeah.
to schools.
So I wanted to clarify.
Was the question.
Yeah. I don't know the nature of the question Dr. Wilder asked, although I can assume what it was. But for those watching at home, in what's presented here, it's important to clarify that the police dollars here associated also include increases from the state and local. The school operations, I believe, is just the local contribution. And
That's
does
correct.
not capture the full dollar amounts for the entire school's budget.
That's correct.
Dr. Wild?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I just asked what was the difference. We had received this information some sessions ago with the fire department budget. And and the police and fire are so worthy of those funds. I'll be the first one to say that. For the police department building, for the fire department building, they are so worthy of the work they do, and I appreciate that. But I was just amazed at to see how I was impressed how we have invested in the police and fire department. So I was just seeing in the fire department, and I was just curious about the investment we made in our school department. So the city portion. That's why I just asked for the city portion, so I can get a better picture in my understanding of our city priorities, of how we're going, and how the city is investing their funds. Thank you.
I also just wanted to note that, I believe our last discussion, I was talking about how when we were doing the budget discussion for the '24 budget, how when we adopted the rate first and didn't have the discussion, it ultimately ended up being that we had to decide between departments and the school funding, and we ended up doing levelized school funding, and I was corrected and told that we did not do levelized school funding because in that point, the state funding was included in the point of correction for me. I was referring to the local level, so thank you for bringing this up. And you'll note that year in '24, the point that Councilman Helgeson at the time made is that we went level to 2022. And you can see that that was actually what was done. At the local level, because of how we did that budget, in adopting the rate first and having to work backwards, we were forced to make the decision between the department jobs and having to cut services in jobs or cutting at the school level. And what we ended up doing, as you saw in '23, we were at $40 million, 7+, and we ended up in '24 having to go down and levelize funding down to 39 because of where we were with that budget. So that's what I was referring to, levelized funding at the local level. So, thank you.
Ms. Timber?
I'm actually really excited right now because we have a council that is very focused on improving the school's CIP portion of the budget.
Can you all use your mics, please? I don't know that
Can you all hear me?
sometimes.
Okay. I'm actually really excited because this entire council, even though we go back and forth on a number of different issues, we're all very excited about pushing money into the schools for the capital improvement projects that are needed. We're going to have different approaches, but that's something I'm confident based on the comments that we've all had that we all agree on. I do want to piggyback Mr. Feraldi's input and understanding of these numbers because as we look at budgets, especially when we look at the schools, there are so many different revenue streams coming into the schools that if you isolate a single revenue stream, you really don't get the complete picture. And so it's helpful to know what the city's putting in, but what the city put in is often in response to what is the state putting in, what grants are available. It's a discussion between these different numbers and these different inputs of revenue. So as we have the larger discussion about the schools, I just want to reiterate Mr. Feraldi's comment and thank Dr. Wilder for pulling out this strand as we continue to have that larger discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mission?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to thank Councilmember Feraldi for what he pointed out, which is the first thing I was thinking when this came up. And while everybody else was going around, I was able to look at it real quick. So if you include the state funding, just like was included with the police department in 2015, the adopted budget had 87, actually I looked at the actual numbers were 87.6 million for the total revenue for Lynchburg City Schools. And then what we adopted last year was 136.6 million. That's a $49 million, 55.9% increase in school funding, right? So you have to look at all those revenue streams. You don't look at a household budget and only consider a single revenue stream. You consider them all. If you've got a dual income household, you consider all your revenue streams. If you've got other earnings coming in, you consider them all. You don't just look at one revenue stream. We've got to look at all of the above. The reality is that the state has contributed more to education over the years. And the point about going from 23 to 24, I remember that very well because I spent, I don't know, 60 hours trying to figure out the categorical funding for that FY24 budget. And what ended up happening was we may have decreased local funding for schools slightly while state funding increased that year. But we also took money out of the administration line item, which had bloated significantly over the years, made a historic investment in the instruction line item in our categorical funding. Teachers got some of the biggest raises that they've ever seen in their career. I know this because I stacked up my wife's contracts against it because she works for Lynchburg City Schools and she teaches there, right? So it's undeniable that happened, right? It happened with less local funding. It's all about priorities. And the other thing that happened that was kind of a blessing in disguise that we didn't know what was going to come out of this is it ended up defunding the equity department in Lynchburg City Schools, which wasn't doing anything for academic success. So I appreciate these numbers. I appreciate having these discussions. What I really want to look forward to is a school division that is getting the academic outcomes our kids deserve.
Mr. Ferrari?
One more point of clarity here for everyone. I know we have newer members, and I want to make sure what we're saying is factual, and then also what people are seeing is factual. It was inferred that council wants to make a commitment on capital funding. And I want to clarify, this does not include capital funding, this is their operating budget. I know there wasn't an intention to mislead, but just for, this is a very hot topic, and I want to make sure we're all being, clarifying as best we can.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Timber?
Thank you for that clarification. I was aware, but not trying to confuse anyone.
Anyone else? Mr.
Yeah, I
Dean?
just want to point out that also the number of students, if that had been a number up here, is trending down. So that's tied to, there's money tied to each student. So when a parent chooses to go elsewhere or the number of students goes down, that money disappears with them. That's not our doing at all, but it does reflect on the school side of things. The equivalent would probably be on the police department, that they're serving 80,000 citizens. Since this is every 10 years, we really don't know if it's gone really up or down, but we do know that it's pretty stable. The services that the police provide to the citizens is pretty stable, whereas the student enrollment is trending down, continues to do that. So just want to point that out.
Mr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you. I think this is such a healthy discussion. I really appreciate the comments from everyone. You know, in working in our school system, school board for 9 years and being a parent for 25 years and work with our school system, it's so important that we as citizens make those investments in our children and in our community. Our children are our future. And when persons are looking to relocate to Lynchburg, whether you're from BWXT or Framerton or Riva or wherever you're coming from, you're looking to the community, the investments made by children into their school system. So we want to have the best school system. So we want to continue to push our school system, to continue to have the best school system we have. You know, we are an urban school setting. So urban school setting can have some challenges. So if you have an urban school setting with challenges with behavior issues and various other things, and then you have a thing called COVID. So COVID was another issue that attacked our kids in our school system. So again, I just want to appreciate our school system for the work they're doing and receiving all children, regardless of disabilities, regardless of socioeconomic conditions, regardless of if you're a teacher and trying to work with kids whose parents are working 2-3 jobs, or if you are a teacher and working with kids whose parents not even at home at all to work with them or to reach them by their getting on the reading level. I work with a kid who's 16 years old, reading on a 5th grade level because his parents has had substance abuse, so the kid has not been in consistent schools. And the one thing that shocked me the most when I was on the school board, when we had kids come before us for disciplinary issues, they had been to about 6 different elementary schools. That blew my mind. How do you teach a child when you pass around from school to school because of homing conditions, because you've been homeless, because you've been in a shelter, so you can't have consistency at that school. So again, with all our school systems and our police department and our fire department, we have some amazing staff members that work in challenging situations. So my hats are off to all of them for devoting their time and their efforts and their passion in work with our children, as working with our police department and fire department and so many other great social services. My goodness, they have a heavy job in working with our social service situations and poverty and other things. But again, I'm just so thankful for our citizens that we have some dedicated staff members in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Just
Yes,
as a
ma'am.
point of reference, I have my budgeteers feeding me information. In 2015, the 599 money was $2,653,798. And what is proposed in '25 is $3,250,000. We are getting about 600,000 more, so that has increased to about $3.9 million of those numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next slide, next one. All right, next section here, there's been a number of questions around department budget submissions.
Sorry. Actually, going back to the previous really quickly, when that's posted for people to view, could we just have a footnote clarifying the revenue streams for each of those items there? So as people are pulling it down, there's not
Yeah, we can fix
confusion around that?
this was simply to answer the expense side.
I totally get that.
Question.
I just, as people
So-
are pulling it down, that was an excellent point. Thank you.
All right, so department budget submissions, there's been a number of questions around department budget submissions. What was submitted, how was it submitted? So the process that we go through is essentially departments will submit to Donna and her budgeteers a budget letter, essentially, that outlines the changes that they are requesting to their budget. And that letter comes across, and Donna reviews it. Her budget staff takes a look at all of the requests, separates them out between, is this an enhancement, right? So is it an additional position? Is it making a part-time position a full-time position? Or is it an inflationary or contractual expense? Ultimately works with the city manager's office to then determine what can be included in the actual proposed budget. So all of that information ultimately is included in the budget document. So what I have here is I just pulled a sample out of the human resources budget, simply because it's the first one I flipped to when I was going to go about answering this question. So you can see here, this is directly from the letter. The only thing we've changed is any typos that the department may have submitted. So in human resources in fiscal year 2026, for instance, they submitted a budget request with a 15.5% increase, or a total increase of $219,000. And you see some of the highlights of those requests. The biggest portion of that was personnel related. So there were increases related to the proposed 3% cost of living adjustment, and the changes in the VRS rate. So this is the multiplier that we have to multiply against the salary to understand the actual VRS retirement costs. And then they also requested two personnel changes. They requested an administrative associate 2 hourly position become a part-time position with benefits, and then they requested a new full-time human resources coordinator position, so a whole new FTE. Outside of that, in contractual services, they requested almost $70,000 in new funding. This was really related to two things. One was NeoGov is a IT platform we use for training and onboarding, and we have a contract with them that kind of governs the cost there. And then they requested additional funding for occupational health services. And then there were additional increases for costs associated with that new full-time human resources coordinator position, as well as purchasing new labor law posters. And we've all seen those. They're hanging in the break rooms of just about every department, everywhere, and every business across the Commonwealth. Next slide, Mitch. So then ultimately, on what we have here included in the budget also are those changes that were made for the proposed budget. So these are the changes to the department's requests that the city manager made in his proposed budget. So you can see the first item there, there's a $100,000 plus decrease in the personnel section. The manager did not recommend either making that hourly position part-time with benefits or providing a new full-time human resources coordinator position. There was also a $60,000 decrease between the requested and the proposed. There was no additional funds provided for the occupational health services. And then there was most of the other charges request was decreased. Obviously, if we're not going to provide the full-time human resources coordinator position, they don't need the computer and the other items that would come along with a new position. And then next slide, Mitch. And you can see, and this is pretty small on the screen here, but you can see then the numbers that are reflective of those changes. So if you look at personnel, the department submitted personnel, total FTEs were 11.75, which was, 1 and some change higher than what was adopted in 2025. You can see that the manager's proposed budget includes what was included in fiscal year 2025. 25, and then you can see across the expenditure categories, those reductions as well. So I just wanted to point out that those changes are included in the budget. I think there is a request for information that will include the actual letters that were submitted, that I'm not sure where we are in the fulfillment of that process, but those should be out to council shortly. But just wanted to make sure everyone was aware.
Thank you. I think I was part of what sparked that line item, and I appreciate your walking us through this. I'm familiar with all of this because I've been reading the beautiful budget book, Donna. Sorry, Miss Witt, and I really appreciate that. But I am still looking for the budget fund summary worksheets, the budget worksheet report, the supporting documentation. Those are the items that I've been requesting a number of times, and I would really welcome being able to receive those.
Yes, well,
So-
we've received a FOIA request from Mr. Mischins as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
we'll be, as soon as that is ready, it will be sent to all of council.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next item is radio funding for the fire department. Over to Donna.
So the estimate needed to fund radios for the fire department is about $700,000. I'm currently working with our fire chief to find those savings in the fire department budget to cover most of this. So they are working very diligently to save as much as they can in their operating budgets. So we feel like by the end of the fiscal year, we'll be funding those radios.
Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think just to make sure that we understand the question, part of that question also was, why did these things get kicked back? Because they were on there previously. Just like the CAD replacement was on there previously, and that has been kicked back. I mean, I think the 911 CAD system we're operating off of right now is what, 2 decades old? Somewhere in that ballpark?
Because I've been told that they weren't ready to purchase a CAD system at this time and that it could be kicked out. I'm also working with the police chief that any savings in his budget at the year end, we're going to set aside to help fund that when the time comes they're ready to replace it. For the budgets, for the radios, what we have typically done is every year put some cash. We like to cash fund our radios. It's not something that we would borrow for. I'm heavily opposed to leases, especially for equipment. It's a losing battle right there. So I like to fund these with cash. Typically, we try to put some money, cash, in the budget as pay-go. And then as that kind of accumulates, we get to the point that we'll have cash available to buy the next radios, whether they're fire, public works, police, whoever comes up next. It is time to replace fire radios. And honestly, went through and tried to fund as much deferred maintenance as I could, since we didn't do any maintenance funds with our pay-go in 2025. So was just trying to do as much as I could in buildings and also Parks and Rec, where we can't borrow or have other funds, so that we could kind of catch up a little bit. And that's why we're really trying to work on those. We realize the importance of them and just trying to find another funding stream.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilder?
Okay, I just want to thank the staff. I mean, I have an accounting degree. That was my internal auditor for 10 years in Washington. And just to hear how you're so dedicated in finding resources, doing what's best financially for our city, and making sure those resources are there, and monitoring this system and that system, and where we can fund this, and the expiration time for that. So again, I appreciate you and your staff for doing all that research. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my job.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Oh, next we have, we had a question about what our lodging tax rate is, and also a question about personal property tax and what a 10-cent increase would give us. So I thought it was just easier to put our various consumption revenues here along with personal property and, of course, real estate. But this is our current rate and what an increment would yield. So for lodging, it's currently at 6.5%. 1% increase would give us $517,000. But we also have lodging per room per night, $1. So it helps us in several ways. One, funding, and two, it helps us know how many rooms per night are actually being paid for. So it's very helpful, especially to the Commissioner of Revenue's office. But a $1 increase in our room per night would yield about $433,000. And then the question on personal property, a 10-cent increase is about $684,000.
Mr. Ferrari?
Thank you, Donna. And for clarity, I appreciate going beyond where the question was. This is really kind of, I think, where we needed to see the different things, the different levers we have, because I have a slightly different approach. With the proposed budget, 89 cents, I've said it publicly, it's not something I'm comfortable with. I am also not comfortable with putting all of our eggs in one basket. I mean, Ward 4 is the most diverse ward in the sense of housing, age, socioeconomical status. I mean, I've got everything I have to represent here, and unfortunately, that means that a real estate reduction, and that's it, would mean that a large portion of the folks I represent who rent aren't getting anything. And we can impact that through this and some other things. So that's partially where I'm coming from insofar as the real estate rate. I had asked a question, and I'm not sure if it's coming up, but the question is this. If a tax increase is necessary, and I'm not saying it is, but if we're talking about lowering local rates and offsetting for expenses, teachers, firefighters, police, capital, why are we only charging $1 a night? Great idea to track it. $1 means we can track how much is coming and wherever. I go to other cities, I go to other areas, and there's a $30 tax or fee on staying in that hotel. Richmond has it. Why are we considering tax increases on local residents, whether it's personal property or real estate or anything, when we could talk about a tax? And I don't like taxes, but that overwhelming majority would, 97.8% would be paid by folks from out of town. If you're telling me $30 would net you, and I'm trying to do the math really fast and stall while I'm talking to get it right, you're telling me a $30 fee for folks coming in on lodging tax would result in how much?
Hang on.
I know, I was trying my best to
So it'd be
stall.
a 29 increase. $12 million, 12.5.
Oh, so it would totally negate the tax increase we've been talking about.
So one thing.
So I know, so let me finish where I'm coming from. And I want your input. I don't support that in principle. I don't think it's a great idea. But I represent Lynchburg. I don't represent the folks coming in. And if there's a solution that prevents taxes going up on the folks I represent, that is paid for by 99% of folks out of town, we start there. We don't start with real estate. We don't start with personal property. We start there. Meals, our local businesses are paying that. I mean, which in turn I'm paying. But there's some wiggle room insofar as people coming in and spending. Folks, if you want to talk about offsetting our debt, which is my priority, and I've outlined that in questions maybe we'll get to, and lowering the tax burden and meeting our obligations, paying teachers, firefighters, police officers, saving Sandusky, I say it's in the lodging room fee. Work with me. That's what I'm asking. I would love your input.
And it's just to provide some context. There were there would come a point at which, raising that bed tax, that nightly tax, past a certain level is going to impact a hotel's ability to charge a room rate, which means it would then have a inverse relationship, or it would actually drive down the value of the lodging tax itself, because that's based on the actual room rate. We would just have to account for that as we thought through the strategy, but I think the strategy makes sense.
That certainly makes sense, and I would not want to negatively impact our business owners and employees here. So I would seek to find that delta, and what is the number? And if you're telling me it's 10 million plus, 8 million plus, folks, we're not that far off from solving the budgetary problem that's been ailing us. It's just taking some creative thinking and some conversations with people far smarter than me. I yield back for now.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I totally agree in concept with what Councilmember Feraldi said. As often as we can ensure that the revenues in our city are coming from outside, that's, I think, one of the discussions I had with you and I've had with the city manager, is sports tourism, and why I think it's so important to get our rec fields up and running, because people come in and stay in hotels and eat out and spend a ton of money if we have facilities that families and parents and youth athletic teams will come and use for tournaments. But I would like to see what other cities are doing with their lodging rate and with that room per night fee. And, we're not Richmond, so we can't necessarily do what Richmond does, but it would be interesting to see where other localities are with that. All taxes are bad. Some are worse than others. I think this is one of the ones that's not so bad compared to the others. Unfortunately, we don't have a lever that we can pull for owner occupants, which is, I think, something we need to look at in the legislative agenda this year, is seeing if we can actually ask Richmond to come up with something to give us the option to provide additional tax relief for owner occupants of homes or residences. We don't have that option, because the thing that really drives me crazy with this whole real estate tax thing is the thought that we could tax somebody out of the home that they live in. And that is what I want to prevent, because I've talked to folks that have told me if the taxes continue to go up, if this historic tax rate were to take effect, that they probably have to sell their homes because they just can't afford the continued tax increases over and over again. And, you can see here, right? That's what we came into when the Republicans took over. Years of Democrat tax and spend policies. And this is where we went. And that's where we've been. But what's proposed is something that is just absolutely not acceptable to me. We can't do that to the homeowners in our city. We can't do that to the senior citizens, the many that don't qualify for the tax relief program. We got to find that common ground. We got to figure out how to ease this burden on our citizens. I do think that the lodging tax is something to look at. But most importantly, we've also got to figure out how to reduce spending. When our citizens having to tighten their belts, we got to do the same.
Ms. Reed?
I do have a question. I guess we haven't gotten there yet, so if we want to wait, it would be about, just tell me if we're going to get there. It would be about our assessments, just what Mr. Mission said about kind of the Richmond piece. Is our 2-year assessment cycle a local decision? And if we wanted to try to push that to a 4-year, is that something that?
It's in the charter.
Our charter, but that has to go to Richmond though, right? Our charter has to be amended through.
That would be a very irresponsible reason to open the charter.
Okay, well, I'm not asking you, but I'm asking you, is that's how we would go through Richmond to,
If it's in the charter, you would have to go through Richmond. And I think if we're going in that direction, one of the things that we would strongly recommend is that rather than making the period between the reassessment longer, that you would do it annually. Part of the difficulty with every 2 years, compared to what most cities our size do, is it creates every 2 years increases that are significantly, oftentimes larger, kind of year over year, than they would be if you reassessed every year. I would also say that city expenses grow every year, not every other year, right? So you align revenue growth with expenditure growth, and and ultimately, the other thing to keep in mind, and some will look at this as a feature rather than a bug, but if a 2-year or 4-year reassessment cycle occurs, well, there is typically appreciation that happens between the annually, right? It doesn't, just because the assessment goes up every 4 years, doesn't mean the value isn't increasing annually. So we are essentially, in those years between reassessments, assessing real estate tax at a progressively lower rate based on the actual value of the real estate. So from that standpoint, aligning the way that revenue comes in with the way that expenditures work, and not creating these very large increases every 2 years, but rather having more modest increases on an annual basis, may be a more effective than actually making the period between reassessments larger.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting, just because, as you know, we've heard the different, you know, as you consider the feedback from everybody, some people are, you know, as they're trying to understand, you have some areas that do every 4 years, and then you hear the 2 years, so you're just trying to figure out what's the smarter way to do it if there was ever an adjustment to the assessment cycle. So, okay, thank you.
Ms. Ferrari?
Going back to the idea of we got to reduce spending, yeah. When I submitted the request that led to this, I had a conversation with our city attorney, and the notion was this, that a part of what my perspective is, I'm opposed to the idea of equalize the rate, do nothing else, for a number of reasons. In this conversation, if the budget's $100, the debt payment to the capital plan is 18 in this conversation. If we go to 76 on the budget, $76, the debt payment stays the same, which means it's harder for us to make the numbers work, because the debt is paying for stuff that councils from 5, 7, 8 years ago have adopted. You tracking? So I have always said the way we curb that is to eat into the debt spending and cut back on that. So if we adjust this, these rates, part of my request was, can we adopt a resolution that has a sunset clause and specifically allocates those dollars, maybe next year, I don't know how all the particulars would work, to the debt? Because year over year, the failure I have observed of all councils, Democrat and Republican, independent and not, is that year over year, it's the $18 to $22 million of debt servicing, paying the credit card, that has bound us. Not the tax rates, not anything else. The schools haven't gotten the local increases, I believe, or gotten the maintenance improvements, because we're spending that much on just the credit card. If we were, yes, now this is where the conservatives will start throwing their haymakers at me. If we were to shift to do something like what Virginia Beach does, where they put more into a surplus account and go on cash payments for those types of projects, you are now in a position where you've reduced spending, you have improved your debt capacity for when you do need to go into debt, and on top of that, you're spending less on debt year over year, which means you have more things to do, pay teachers, pay firefighters, pay police officers. But you can't do that in one fell swoop. It takes multiple years. I hope y'all are tracking with me. I hope it makes sense, because that's why I have never supported a capital budget. That's why I supported the amphitheater. That's why I voted against just cut the tax rate in January, first thing. It's because it takes a vision that everyone at home can clearly understand and we can set out. And then quite frankly, we can turn to the public and say, do you see where we're going? Does this make sense? That's what I'm trying to show you all in asking these questions. I'm sorry for being long-winded. It's not easy to articulate. But year over year, if we can eat into the capital spending, not push back the projects, eat into how much we're spending in debt. We have reduced the spending and the debt. We have improved our debt capacity. And guess what? We could even go into debt to pay for a new school, and it would be in a better situation. It takes multiple budgets to get there. That's my concept.
Ms. Timberlake?
I would be far more open to increasing consumption taxes, especially if it's, as you're describing, Mr. Feraldi, going into a specific fund to pay down on debt. Just going into the general fund, I am open but have some questions. But I'm more open, especially if it's going specifically to pay down on debt. Additionally, I'm not entirely opposed to what you're talking about as far as a larger surplus of funds for PAYGO, but I would like to see that as a specific fund with criteria around it, rather than just as general surplus or the general fund at the end. Yeah, unassigned fund balance.
If I may, that's the concept.
Yeah.
Basically, you would adopt a plan that says, we're going to have pay-go projects expecting a surplus. And that's why I don't like the word, to Donna's point. A surplus should be, for our conversation, anything that wasn't expected. What I'm trying to get you all to understand where I'm coming from is this plan would have pay-as-you-go surplus, pay-as-you-go budget amount items for a few $1 million to do this project and that and so on. It takes us from going into debt to pay for those and puts it in a capital plan that is more pay-go than going into debt. So it's planned.
Mr. Mitchell?
And I think there's some elements of that are really good and helpful. But I do think that we need to, if there's projects we don't need to do, we don't need to just not cut back on the projects, right? If there's things that just simply aren't necessary, we don't need to be doing it. The debt issue that we're facing, I believe, is coming from probably new projects that we didn't need to do when we should have been maintaining our old buildings, right? What do you call it, the pig in the python, is that how you say it?
Pig and snake.
Pig in the snake, right? How many more years till Heritage High School's out of there?
Well, it's a 20-year debt, but the heavy part's kind of fallen off.
Finally.
About 2021, it's
Finally.
starting to fall off.
Right. So when we look at that, right, when we look at these huge projects, these massive projects, we're gonna have to pay for those for quite a while. But we need to really focus on some of these things that are coming ahead of us. Some of these things that we've got from the comp plan, like the James River Parkway beyond 2030, $135 million. We don't need that. That's a highway that goes between the sewage treatment facility and the old landfill, right? I'm pretty sure that's not exactly something that we want to look at. And that's whatever's driving these expensive projects is part of the issue that we're facing. Could it be the consultants? One of the things I'd like to look at is maybe we should look at doing a 50% reduction across the board next year and paying consultants. Maybe we should look at doing a 50% reduction across the board next year in discretionary professional development. Maybe we should look at doing a hiring freeze. Maybe we should look at all these different measures, right? Just different levers, different options that would create capacity for us or potentially freeze or stop spending or slow spending that are in addition to some of these other tools, because we've got to really take care of those citizens that we've got that are living in their homes, that are working hard to make ends meet, right? And they're struggling with this tax increase that's coming. So we've got to look at these different options, and I'm really excited to hear about what these other localities are doing that are similar to ours with the lodging tax. I think that's something worth looking into.
Mr. David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just for what it's worth, my 2 cents. I love it when we compare things to homes, and something I definitely relate with. The idea of running up the credit card is always a bad idea. I think we all know that. I think it's an interesting comparison, but where it breaks down is we're the ones that runs up the card, and they're the ones that have to pay the card. I don't want that lost in this discussion. Anything we can do to reduce our debt capacity, whether it's a formula or a decision to do it, I think that makes good, solid financial sense. I do my best to not have credit card debt at all. I know that's probably unreasonable for a locality. Bonds are a great deal compared to some of the credit card rates we pay on an individual consumer basis. But still, the idea of low debt is a sound financial policy that I can get behind. Any way we can not do that. I like long-term thinking. Sometimes council changes quickly, and the faces change, and the staff is here throughout. And that's where we need to have the long-term thinking, you know? That's where it should be generated, because you guys are going to probably outlast some of us, maybe. And, you know, if I go as long as Jeff Helgeson, maybe not, but that's highly unlikely. So I'll be 80 years old. That ain't happening. But anyway, I want us to be long-term thinkers, and I like what they're saying about get us the rates on these, Mr. Feraldi. That's absolutely great creative thinking. I'm agnostic on where the revenue gets cut or comes in, or the tax gets raised or doesn't. I think all the above, just like energy. I'm for solar, I'm for nuclear, I'm agnostic on find ways to do it. I had a real quick question on the 2 different lodgings. You may have said it. There's one lodging, 6.5. Is that a percentage of the stay fee? That's what that
That's
is?
a percentage of your room.
And 517, and then the other is a one fee per
$1
stay,
per
dollar
room per night.
Okay, so I'm used to seeing that. I can tell you out in Ward 3, we've had a plethora over the last years of new hotels right outside the line. You know, so people got choices. I know we got Graduation of Liberty coming up, and they'll all be full. And praise God for that, because that definitely will bring in some revenue, and that's great. But if people book early, guess which side of the line they're probably booking on? Because I'm guessing the rates are a little lower over there. Maybe, maybe not. I don't stay in those hotels, but if you go down Wards Road and the minute you hit that line, there's all these hotels that have popped up. And I think we got to be careful, because in economics, it's called the law of diminishing return, which y'all were talking about. And that's a real thing, and it needs to be calculated in, because you can't tax yourself into prosperity, and you can't always count on the revenue going up. At a point, you will start to drive people to other choices. So it needs to be an educated decision, as Mr. Feraldi said. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Thank you.
Mr. Wilder.
Yes, thank you again for the discussion. I really appreciate this. Just so the viewers can understand, I know we're recommending, well, the stated amount is the same. The real estate rate is the 89 cents, but the value of the homes have increased. So what's the rationale, reasoning for the value of the homes that have increased? What's a short summary of that?
People are willing to pay more for them now than they were previously, you know, bottom line. So I think within the city, what you've seen is there's a tremendous demand for housing at all levels. And when there's, and if you look on the MLS, there's very little supply, right? So, you know, ultimately, the law of supply and demand has just driven the value of the homes up.
So the rate is recommended to be the same, but the value of the homes have increased because of demand. And I look at so many other situations where anything you have bought, the prices increase. We ever talk about the price of eggs or whatever because of inflation or whatever, everything has increased. And to be realistic, I don't think anything has stayed the same or gone down. The property value increase, we're looking at per homeowner. What was the average? I think about $300 or so dollars. What was that average you showed some time ago?
I think it was $299,
Yeah.
if I'm not,
So-
don't quote me, but I
Okay,
think that's
yes.
what it was.
So on average, about $200 increase. I'm not diminishing that, but I'm just saying, if you look over time, anything you have bought, the price is gonna be increased. That's just a common everyday thing. Things at times things are gonna go up, but again, because it's also some of the benefits of our community, our city, because our city is doing well. More people, our population has increased. Again, one thing we can't forget is the quality of life. As we could get so caught up in so many things, I forget about the quality of life and new restaurants, new parks, and new other things in our city. A reason why people want to come to a city because of the hospitals, because of the care they can receive here, because of the amenities. Like we had an international festival on this past Saturday. We had about thousands of people there with vendors from all over because of the increase of what we're doing in our community and the infrastructure and investment that have been made downtown. So those things are, to me, it's like the quality of life that is so important in a community, in a city, to have a city that's going. At some point, we get to where we say, we don't want any more growth. We want to just be a dying city and don't want to make any investments. And when we do that, who's going to want to come and live in a city like this? We are landlocked cities on 50 square miles. Sometimes the hotels are going outside because there's no more property to build a hotel. So again, we got to realize, we got to make sure we don't lose sight of the quality of life and about people coming because of the parks, because of the trails, of so many amenities that we have, because of a great hospital system, because of the amenities we have in the city, is why people come to here and invest in here, especially downtown, all the way on Bedford Avenue, where I grew up right there, the investments that have made in that block. I mean, if you knew how that place looked when I was a kid, with this old Coca-Cola plant, and now the way it looks now, it is amazing the investments that have been made in our community. Again, who's going to come to a city where places are dilapidated? That's why we work with our downtown association to make sure we don't have no abandoned buildings and make sure we, like the government, sitting in some funds for first-time businesses, like $300,000 or whatever, to make some investments in those so they can get rid of some of the storefronts that are dilapidated and going down. So we got to continue to make investments in our community so our community continue to grow. But if we lose sight of that, our city is going to be a dying place. And when kids graduate from University of Lynchburg or College of Liberty, they're not going to be in a dying city. They want to be in a city that's thriving, that has some things for them so they can raise a family, so they can grow. Thank you.
Mr. Ferrari.
I'll conclude by saying this. I would say the plan, as I'm advocating for, between both lodging and the lodging room night fee. Off the cuff math, I would say 10% on lodging, and then the balance of what we need for this budget as proposed goes into the lodging room night fee. And then on top of that, yeah, we do need to look at the capital spending to amend some of that, and then I say we're good to go for next week. That's what I would do. Emphasis on we do need to take a look at some of the projects, but.
Mr. Mitchell.
So I was able to pull this off of Virginia tax. And what they're showing for the rates, the max in Virginia right now looks to be 11%. And these are 2022 numbers. Lodging, excuse me, as of December 1, 2021. It's the newest one I could find on there. So I'd like to know what's updated from this. But it looks like the max that they're showing on there is 11%, and the max per night is $3. It's showing.
I found this on the web.
Well, I did find it on the web. And then looking at this examples, Norfolk 9%, $3. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know, you know, because the issue we got here is we've got the hotels in Lynchburg, right? But that also includes, you know, some of these probably extended stay type places and some of these other, you know, smaller, older hotels that have been around for a while. And if we were to raise taxes substantially on them, it could kind of drive business away, I would think, on some of that potentially. Just thinking of this from the whole scope of it. But Campbell, right across 460, you know, if we're not careful, they got a 2% no nightly fee in Campbell, right? And one of the things that has always kind of mind-boggled me, right, is the car dealerships in Lynchburg. They used to all be in the city, except for, I think it was John P. Hughes Dodge up in Madison Heights back in the day, I think is what it was called. That was the only one that I can think of that wasn't in the city. They were all in the city. Well, now they're all in Bedford County, where there's no gross receipts tax. We might have a couple of them. I think the ones on this side of, on the city side of Forest Road, like the Hyundai dealership and maybe, is the Mercedes BMW, is that in Lynchburg?
I think so. I think Honda is, Toyota maybe. I mean, we'd
But we're
have
getting ready to lose another one. I just saw the sign pop up. Future Home of Kia is in Bedford County.
space. Has nothing to do with, we.
I mean, but they've got to be saving a lot of money when they're not paying the gross receipts tax, right, in Bedford County.
We'd have to dig into exactly how that works with the inventory on a.
And
car
how's the personal
dealership.
property tax work on those vehicles when they're on the lot?
That's what we'd have to, we can give you an answer, I don't know offhand.
So that's something that I think about when we talk about moving these levers of taxation, right? We've got to also look ahead at what's the potential unintended consequence of what we do, right? All the auto dealerships used to be in the city of Lynchburg. I don't know if we were collecting personal property tax on them, because I've also always heard the whole thing about them loading them up on the car carriers and taking them out of the city for a night. So
I've heard the same.
yeah, I don't know the reality of that, right? But the point that I'm saying is, I see the space side of it, I get that, but it's also, there's no gross receipts tax in Bedford County, and the personal property tax rate is, I think, lower than Lynchburg's. So if they're saving, moving, if we start doing things that will push people outside, we just got to balance what we do with these things. That's all I'm saying. I don't have a problem going after choice taxes before the other taxes. I think if we've got to do it, we got to do it. But primary thing we need to focus on is reducing spending.
Ms. Tim,
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All that is spot on. The only difference is Campbell County doesn't allow short-term rentals, period. So there's a strong differential that we allow them, and they're not allowed in Campbell. Just wanted, for the record, that's a huge thing to keep in mind.
Yep.
Short-term rentals would be Airbnbs, and so, thank you, I appreciate it.
Ms. Tim.
Thanks. I just wanted to piggyback something that Dr. Wilder had mentioned earlier, because he was talking about the rate of inflation, how the cost of everything has gone up. And he was also talking about that in relationship to home values going up. And it's really important to kind of differentiate some of that, because inflation's not a good thing. Like, it's not something that we want, but it's something that we're all dealing with. And it's something that all these households are dealing with, and it's part of why we need to be able to keep housing affordable. And we need to keep the rate lower so that people can afford to stay in their homes as they're dealing with these inflationary costs elsewhere. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Mr. Wilder? Yes, thank you. Other point, but the car dealerships, again, I would like that, maybe at some point we can inventory them, not during this budget session, because I know you've already overswamped with so many requests. So I'm asking you to do it now. But I think it'd be good to talk with some of those car dealerships, just get a feel. But usually, again, with Lynchburg being 50 miles of landlocked, I mean, if you want to expand, most of the ones I've seen, they're expanding. They're not making smaller lots, because, oh, we want to go to a smaller lot. No, they're going bigger. because they need more space. Is a lot of times why they're going to Lakeside Drive, whatever. So I think that's it. And anytime I have booked, maybe I'm just a different person. Anytime I book a hotel that's close to where I'm going. I never look at, oh, the tax is 2 cents more here. I have never, maybe because I'm not that kind of a person, because my life is so busy, but I just can't even, well, people might do that. Say, oh, I'm not gonna stay here, but I'm going, if I'm going to Liberty graduation, where it's gonna be 1,000, 100,000, whatever people gonna be there, I want to find the closest place that's gonna get me in and out. I'm not going to Bedford, I'm not going to Rustburg, I'm not going to Danville. I want to be close as I can to beat that traffic. So, and I'm going to VCU's this Saturday. I'm going somewhere close by in the fan area that's close to the convention center versus somewhere in Henrico County where I got to fight the traffic. So again, I mean, that has pros and cons, but make sure the citizens, we're listening to all of that information. Thank you.
I have one thing to say. The housing market, right here, right up on Washington Street where you live, you got one house that's sold for $1.4 million.
Both of mine.
And then you have another house, some professor bought for his daughter getting ready to attend Liberty. I think they got about $2 million in that house. So that affects everything around it. It drives the value of property up. It don't matter what it look like or anything. But you got somebody come in the neighborhood, pay $2 million for one property, everybody else can get that money. And you got a lot of people from the north moving here and from out west who don't mind paying $500,000 for.
The kids are going to school here and they'll buy a house here for 4 years. That blows my mind. I'm like, wow, you got it like that? Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay, had a number of questions about fund balances, specifically the unassigned general fund balance. And this is just a reminder from our financial management policies that unassigned fund balance, the purpose of it is to be maintained at a level to provide the city with sufficient working capital and a comfortable margin of safety to address emergencies and unexpected declines in revenue without borrowing. The city shall not use the unassigned general fund balance to finance recurring operating expenditures. And then also, and this was something that our rating agencies really look at and was a recommendation that we change our fund balance policy to what it currently is. And that is the city will maintain an unassigned general fund balance equal to a minimum of 10% of general fund revenues with a goal of 15% as the city strives to grow incrementally each year subject to revenues available. And then lastly, the city will balance moving towards this 15% target, balancing with its annual pay-as-you-go capital improvements requirement. So again, we've looked at those funds as how we, anything over our policy is how we pay for specifically our maintenance and things that don't qualify for bond funding in the capital program. So that's why, just a reminder of those policies. And then we had should I pause? Sorry. Yep, I think. So then we had a question about how we balanced the 24 year end. We presented this at council retreat, and this is just a reminder of kind of the balancing that we do with the unassigned fund balance. So one more, Matt, thanks. So we ended the 23 actual ending fund balance, the general fund, unassigned fund balance, at $68.1 million, which is a result of COVID and how we came through COVID with unexpected revenues. So that's how that got to be so high. And then we have a series of adjustments here that were council action for first quarter adjustments, the 12th Street stabilization, fourth quarter adjustments, and then use of this fund balance for 24. And then we ended 24 with $11.2 million in additional revenues, 2.2 million savings in our expenditures. and then some year-end adjustments, which you've seen on our general fund summary. Our actual ending fund balance for 2024 was $40.4 million. And that is, that ties out to our 24 annual comprehensive financial report. So that is a snapshot on June 30th of 2024. And then if you look at that general fund summary, you'll note that our 24 actual ending fund balance becomes your beginning estimate for 25. But then we also had a couple of adjustments for our use of fund balance and our first
Keep in mind
quarter.
what that means. On June 30th of 2024, if you looked at our bank account, we had $40.4 million in cash in the bank at that one point in time, right? So I think that's.
No, that's our fund balance. That doesn't necessarily tie to our cash
Well-
or our investments. But, okay. This is the difference between budget and accounting.
I actually understand the discussion that you guys are having right now. I appreciate you.
All right, so apologies, keep going.
You might say, yeah, stay on that.
Stay in your lane, Greg.
So anyway, so then council adopted use of fund balance when we adopted 25 and did some first quarter adjustments. So if you see on that general fund summary, our estimated ending fund balance for 25 is this 37.5 million. That's a budget number, it's an estimate, because since we're still in 2025, I won't have that actual number until after the audit's finished in November of 25. So, but by our financial policies, as we're shown here, that would mean that our required fund balance at 11.8%, because we've kind of grown to 11.8 from 10% over the past few years, would be 26.9 million, which left about 10.6 million for one-time expenditures. Now, we have updated this, if you look at the proposed budget, to actually show this based on our 26 proposed revenues, and we ended up with about $9 million available for one-time expenditures. And then, if you'll flip one more, Mitch, please. So, in our proposed budget for 26, where we actually ended up budgeting was 11.7 for our general fund unassigned fund balance, which was our $28.3 million. If council chose, they could drop that to 10% and still qualify in our policies, which would allow $4.1 million of one-time funds that could be available for things like Feraldi mentioned, that would reduce some borrowing in the CIP. It could pay for those radios, it could pay for Wigington Road, a number of things. But, and this was, this excerpt was actually in the 26 proposed budget on page 5 of the budget overview. The proposed budget includes 11.7% unassigned general fund balance, which is a slight decrease below adopted 25, which was 11.8. The total unassigned general fund balance in fiscal year 26 is projected to be $28.3 million. But again, okay, funding in the amount of $9 million of the 24 unassigned general fund balance is proposed as transfers to the cities and schools' capital funds for projects in the capital improvement program. And that 28 million isn't really magic. It has to be based on, we have to budget at least 10% with a goal of 15% of our revenues. And the reason there's a difference between where we budget and where we end up, part of that is the difference between our beginning fund balance that we update once the audit is complete. So that's kind of how that works. But I just wanted to make sure you do know, as was in the budget document, that we budgeted 11.7% of revenues for our proposed unassigned fund balance. And there is an option for city council, should you choose to lower it to 11%, 10%, whatever, not below 10%, please, to be with our financial policies. But there would be one-time money there available should council decide to do that.
Ms. Reed?
So to kind of piggyback off of what Councilman Feraldi was speaking to earlier about, like, paying cash for things. Let's say council did vote to drop to the 10%, to add an additional 4.1 million to our one-time funds, and we ended in November with the 10 million, and we adopted the 10% plan, so we'd be at 14 million. We could potentially vote to take that 14 and apply it to the pool and library.
So you've got that 10 million actually became 9 as we
Okay.
finalize the numbers. And those 9 million is already in the proposed budget to pay for maintenance projects.
Okay, but we could say we want it allocated to those specific projects?
You-
Or they're not?
But you would have to then remove the cash-funded maintenance projects from the proposed 2026 budget in order to free up that cash for the pool and library projects.
Yes, but.
Right, so if we wanted to say, we would like to remove the pool and library, let's hypothetical the situation, okay? We wanted to remove the pool and library from the current budget tonight, because our plan would be to do this instead and allocate the one-time monies that we're forecasting for and put it on that, so we could pay them cash and not have to CIP them out, and to the councilman's point, have to use debt or whatever, spread them out over. Could we do it that way? And then split the money and maybe just say, hey, we're just gonna use 14 million between the two projects in between, and kind of, that's what you get, and kind of make it work?
So you
In
would
theory?
have, there would be $13 million available. If you take the 9 that's already
Okay, so 13 million.
allocated, and then an additional 4 million. Okay,
Right.
so $13 million. But what that would do is you would have to pull the funding from the maintenance projects that's already been allocated in the proposed budget, which is council can do that. 4 votes, you can do that. So it would pull it from our maintenance projects, just as, I would caution you, because we didn't budget cash for maintenance projects in '25. So it would be a 2-year drought of doing any type of maintenance on our buildings and parks. But you could do that. I mean, you could pull that $9 million out of the proposed budget, and, but it's $13 million. So what's out there for the pool is just over 10 million, and the library is 12 million. So you couldn't do both, or you could split it between the two, and reduce the bond funding for both, or that would be council purview to do that.
Mr. Mission?
Yeah, so if you were to take that approach, what you would be looking at doing is, one, you would kill the 950,000 local pay-as-you-go for schools, capital project funding. You'd probably kill that 700,000 for the radios potentially, if we were to apply all that money there. And quick story about the radios, they're using the same radios. I think it was October 4th, I remember, because it was October 4th, my dad's birthday of 2020. October 4th of 2020, I was on Oxford Street trying to radio out. We found a victim inside of a house fire in the basement, and we couldn't talk to the people outside, right? So couldn't have medics waiting at the door for the victim that we found in the basement. And we got to replace those radios, because the technology that they have now will allow them to be able to make those communications. So you kill things like that. When you look at the building projects, we've got all the roof replacements, that's pay-as-you-go, right?
If it's a partial roof, yes.
So the-
If
so
it's
the
a full roof, no, it's bond
partial,
funded.
partial roofs on city buildings. And then we're looking at an HVAC system for the Armory and the city market. We're looking at HVAC controls in the 3rd floor of City Hall. We're looking at building condition reassessment citywide. We're looking at just a variety of projects I see here that are things that we deferred last year. Is that right? These are things that
That's correct.
we pulled out last year. So I think, sure, in concept, we could do that, but it would come at a cost of all these other things that are probably far greater needs. Because we really got to stop getting in this position. It's something Councilmember Timmer and I have been talking about, is figuring out how to establish some kind of maintenance reserve down the road. We've got to do it, but we've got to figure out how to fix these aging buildings before we start reimagining things.
Mr. Ferrone? Okay.
Well-
That's the thing. I'm trying to absorb everything that I'm hearing. I'm just trying to think of like a compromise. At some point we could think about, as far as looking at, I want to make sure the staff is comfortable with our rating, because I know everything we do is going to affect our bond rating. So I want to make sure the staff is comfortable with our rating, but we can look at, for example, if we didn't equalize the tax rate, the equalization rate, what is the amount again? Right now it's 89 cents. To equalize it is
76.7.
76, okay. If we did equalize it to that 76 cents to maybe like 80 cents or whatever, or, yeah, whatever. I'm just thinking of a combination of things. So a portion of the equalization, a little bit, and then a portion of the increase in lodging and a portion here, something, and also maybe looking at that amount there, just something that the staff is comfortable with, so we can have a win-win for everybody, so we can have a lower tax rate, we can have the thing that we already currently leave the budget the way it is, and all those projects are already in there, so we can keep it the same way, lower the tax rate a little, and then pull it up a little, some funds from other sources, from whether it's the lodging tax or whatever the case may be, just looking at all those levers and seeing what the staff thinks is the best way to get to this point, where it's not a stressor on the city budget or a stressor for the staff, to see what we can do economically that's still supportive of our city, still supportive of lowering tax rate, still meeting all the obligations that we need to do for our city, if that makes sense.
Mr. Ferrari?
Correct me if I'm wrong. So far as the credit agencies, I'm going to speak generally, so if I miss something specific, please correct me. They don't really care as much where it comes from. It's, are you good for your money in concept? Am I missing something with that?
When you do a GO bond, which is a general obligation bond, when council votes to do that, you are guaranteeing that the city is going to pay for those bonds.
Right.
With the full faith
Faith and
of the
credit.
government, yes.
Now, if we can't, it's my understanding state code stipulates we can't use existing dollars. We are forced to do a tax increase to pay for it. So that's why I'm trying to come up with other ideas that are not cut real estate, do nothing else. I think we have an idea of where to go. I appreciate where you're coming from. I really do think that if these are viable, which I do believe they are, these being the nightly fee and the percent on the lodging, heck, even take 5% and go down just to be safe. We're still doing well, and we haven't even talked about reducing some of the CIP proposals. Again, I submit that if y'all want to be done, I mean, that's it, and we've done everything we've committed to, all 7 of us, and that's a budget I believe all 7 of us can get behind, and the city can too.
Ms. Reed?
Okay, one more question, sorry. So, I hear you and you, so, and I get it. So we would leave it the way it is because of how everything was proposed with the maintenance and so forth. What about, I know we're about to get into the proposed tax rate situation, so we'll see what that all looks like. But, the fire equipment that had been requested, that we've heard about, and that's not on anywhere that I know of, correct? No additional fire equipment?
Well, I don't know exactly in their budget.
There's nothing new. That's been
The
requested.
fire equipment, the striker equipment, is being replaced as it needs to be replaced at this point in time.
Right, and but that's been covered, like that's being paid for through grant money and everything, is that, or is that something where, what are we,
A number of different sources.
okay. Have there been any requests made that we're aware of that we're being asked to fund right now? That were, like, new requests?
I'm not sure how to answer that. The fire does need new radios, so that we're
Okay, so the
working to
radios.
fund. They asked for an alert system that is later in the CIP, but again, that needs to be cash funded. It doesn't qualify for bond funding.
Okay.
So trying to work with them to save up some cash to be able to do that purchase when it's needed.
Okay, so with the one-time funds that we may be getting, depending on what that looks like, if we wanted to talk about potentially giving additional monies to the schools for the building repairs, because, you know, I know that right now in this budget, $60 million was recommended and built into it for the next, you know, within the next 5 years, if we wanted to talk about giving additional for maybe one of the projects that we're not covering that was needed, that would be something that we could do, because that's not currently built into this maintenance.
If you went to 10%, that
Correct.
4 million?
Well, the 9 plus potentially the 4, or
Yes,
any of it,
yes.
that could be something that could be put on schools, okay.
But if I may, Stephanie, that's once. Next
One
year,
time,
You've
yeah.
got to make up
That's
for that.
correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
one-time funds.
Yeah, I know,
They're
okay.
not recurring.
Just making sure. Thank you.
Mr. Mission.
So, I mean, thanks for presenting this. And just to also clarify on this, if the revenue were to decrease, right? Because right now this is based off of 242 million in general fund revenue.
That's correct. The
On the 10%.
proposed 26 revenues.
So if the proposed 26 revenue to decrease, then that additional one-time funds would also increase.
It does increase, that's correct.
Right. So, just something to point out there. The question that I have is what's this proposal? So I'm curious to see what this proposal is. I think $10 a night is probably, is that what you said?
May I respond?
I'm curious to see what the proposal
Yeah.
is.
The Feraldi plan, 10% lodging, and $18 or $19 lodging fee per night. Now, you start there, you go to the CIP, change those, and bring in the equalization, if you will, on that dollar amount per night. You're done. Does that make sense? So
It
the
makes sense.
capital budget, if we were to take a project out and the the financing on that debt was 500,000, well, then you can come down $1 on the nightly fee. So, I mean, and then you'd keep trying to work it and get it
Yeah.
to a more comfortable dollar.
It makes sense, but when I'm looking at, people are only charging a max of $3 a night in Virginia.
We are the largest Republican governed city this side of Virginia Beach, so it's time to do something different.
I mean, I get it, I understand that, but the question that I have is, what's the impact going to be to the hotel industry? Putting a nightly charge of that amount on there. Because essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna take, you know, maybe a hotel that's got a 89 or 109 or what, I've never gotten a hotel in Lynchburg, and I couldn't tell you how long, so I wouldn't know what they cost. Right? So 89, 109, somewhere in that ballpark, you know, and then you turn that into a $20 more, almost. Is that gonna have a negative impact? What percentage of the, and I know you mentioned the thing about Campbell not allowing short-term rentals, what percentage of the total with this is gonna be impacting the short-term rental market, right? Those are the questions that I have. Is that something, I mean, do we know if there's gonna be any impact, or are we just going into this blind?
So, I mean, I think you could assume there's going to be an impact. I think what you would ultimately see if we did 10% and $18, let's just,
If I may interject, I would hope to get it to 15 and reduce the capital spending
So you could cut
if possible.
every
That's my goal.
project in the proposed CIP, and it's not going to impact debt service in 2026.
Correct.
Because the debt service, you're not going to see a debt service impact until 18 months to 24 months down the road, just based on, when the spending actually occurs. But I think what you'd ultimately see, so say a $100 room night, just for the sake of argument, to go from, that's $3, so going from 7 to 10% on the lodging tax. So that's a tax assessed on the room rate, that'd be $3 a night, let's say. Then going from 1 to, say 15, just for the sake of argument, to 15, that's another $14. So that's a $17 increase in cost on a $100 room night, a $100 a night room. I think what you would end up seeing is there would be some decrease in the actual cost per room night that the hotelier would have to adjust for.
If I may, Marty. So the Lynchburg tariff that we're talking about, for folks coming into the city and spending time here, don't forget, I said there needs to be a sunset clause incorporated into this somehow. So if it's 3 years of $15, and then that comes off, because we've eaten into that debt that I've been talking about, that's how you eat into the debt spending, and then it goes away, and it rains back. There needs to be a sunset clause incorporated in this, so please don't forget that component. So, for your awareness.
Thanks. And so one other thing, going back to that, where are we at on exploring the 150% revenue, or the 150% allowable billing for Medicare and Medicaid with our ambulance service fees? Because I think I brought that to you guys months ago.
Staff met with our provider this week, and I have not had a chance to hear the outcome of that meeting.
Because if that
It's last week.
works, which fairly certain it will, 3.8 times 1.5, that's another 1.85 million.
The
Something like that.
collection rate of ambulance bills is not near what it is for other things.
No, that's not what I'm
So-
talking about. I'm talking about what you have projected for revenue. So what you have projected for revenue is 3.8 million. I'm not talking about what's billable,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And from what I understand, Medicare and Medicaid, which is the vast majority of who's paying for a lot of these ambulance rides, right? They will allow us to charge up to 150%. And I think that's what, I'm glad to hear that you guys are exploring that. If that's the case, that's just money that's going to be coming in from the insurance provider, right? Granted, it's taxpayer-based healthcare, but it's still recovering revenue for us. And it's a simple change in the ordinance, from what I understand. So we're looking at another potential 1.8 million there in revenue that could just be there from not, or just from changing an ordinance. So as soon as we can get that answer, I'd love to also have that, right? I think that would be helpful. And I'm just basing that off of your projection, not based on outstanding billing, because I would never want us to move to hard billing on that. I would always want to say soft billing on that, which is what we're still doing, right? Is that soft billing on the ambulance service stuff?
Our provider does the original billing, and my staff does delinquent collections.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Donna?
This next slide is just, has already been stated, that the 26 proposed debt service represents payments on current bond issues plus an estimate of interest payments for use of the line of credit for current projects. So changes in the 26 through 30 CIP really has no impact on the 26 proposed debt service. So just putting that out there has been stated.
Mayor, just comment on that. I understand that you're absolutely factually correct, but I also want to make sure that we understand that just because we push the can down the road, what we're doing right now is we're having to kick the can that other people kicked down the road a long time ago. And at some point, that really just needs to stop. I mean, we need to say enough's enough. Let's go to pay as you go. Let's go to reducing that credit card. Let's take the scissors out, and tear up a few of those. That's the way we deal with our consumer debt, and I don't think it's that different. And I can tell you at home, if I told my wife that, well, we won't have to pay that for such and such years, she'd still look at me and give that, hey, Kurt, that's not smart. I mean, that's just not the best way to do things fiscally. So I understand factually you are correct, but there's a philosophical thing at play here, and that's that we can't borrow ourselves into prosperity, and we can't tax ourselves into prosperity, and the only thing we really should be focusing on, I think, and as best I can see, is to reduce spending. And I know that everybody keeps telling me bare bones, sky's falling. I just don't want us to forget who it is that is paying all the bills around here. And it's the citizens, and we're already one of the highest tax stressed localities in the Commonwealth. And I don't want to be there 3 years from now. I don't want to be there 5 years from now. And if we're running up a bunch of bills for somebody else to pay, I like the idea of a tariff on people coming in. That makes some sense to me, because that doesn't affect people in Ward 3. I don't want my folks having to sell their houses, and that's the real life situation that I'm hearing. I know people who've left because of taxes and schools. And it's not that schools are wonderful and have high SOLs. It's the other direction. They're leaving the city because of taxes and because of schools. So I just wanted to have a little say on that.
Vice Mayor,
But I
think
understand what you're saying is factual.
I think you'd find us in complete agreement. Basically, the intent of having this slide up here is to say, if we are looking at cutting the capital program to then create savings on the general fund side, that's not something we can do.
It doesn't impact 26.
Right.
Right.
Along those same lines, if we are looking at, equalizing the tax rate or lowering the tax rate, we would strongly recommend that we need to, in turn, lower the projects or decrease the amount of projects in the capital program. Because quite frankly, what we have to look at is, can we afford this in the future, ultimately, right? And we also have to look at, Donna's going to get to some of our debt management policies, but a lot of that, one of the key policies there is built around essentially our debt to income ratio, right? So the higher your income, the more you can afford on a capital program. The lower your income, the less you can afford. So if we're considering making an adjustment to the overall level of revenue, then we would almost necessarily need to make an adjustment to the overall level of debt. So that's one point. And maybe this is more pedantic than practical, but when we think about municipal debt, municipal debt isn't bad. Too much municipal debt is bad, ultimately, right? Because the way that debt works, especially with big infrastructure projects, is that it spreads the cost of the infrastructure projects over a number of years, and therefore the people who actually use that improvement are the ones who end up paying for it through debt service. So if we're going to make, you look at the 501-221 improvements that we'll be implementing, that project will wrap up in the early 2030s. You'll have brand new infrastructure. That infrastructure will be used over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And if we finance some of that, it's the folks that 20 or 30 years down the road ultimately end up paying for the improvement. So there is utility in debt. There's a good sense in using debt to fund large infrastructure projects. We just got to make sure we don't have more debt than we can afford.
Mr. Ferrari?
I agree with all that has been said between the last two speakers. But, and I say this with a smirk and not as a negative comment, once that project is paid for, staff then turns around and fills that capacity with something else. Yes, this doesn't affect us right now, which is why, under this concept that I'm constantly pushing right now, a part of this would phase out because we have relied less on debt and more on cash projects and maintenance. It won't happen overnight. It'll take a few cycles to get there. And because we've done it that way, you've now balanced back out. The hotels know what to expect, the tourists know what to expect, and you still have likely seen market fluctuations on the higher end, and the city's now in a better position. So that's why cycling this part of the policy out makes a whole lot of sense in my book, if you're able to eat into some of the projects that have been in CIP.
Ms. Donna?
I'd just like to, as a reminder, we're an old city. And because we're a city, we have to pay for all of our transportation projects. So when, we need to absolutely keep track and do our maintenance on our bridges, our roads, our culverts, to make sure that we don't have to replace them any sooner than necessary. But because, I get it, I hate debt as well, I don't do credit card debt, okay, I get it. Don't have a mortgage, because I get it. But to have enough cash to fund our transportation projects, even with VDOT doing 50%, that's substantial. And it's not going to end in 3 years, because it's always going to be the next bridge, the next road. So even if you don't even look at like funding like for the police department, or Parks and Rec type projects, just looking at transportation, that's a heavy lift for debt that I don't know how she would do it.
I certainly agree. My position is, if we're going to spend $50 million over the course of years, decades, on downtown beautification or different projects throughout the city, where's our treasure? So there's a lot going on in this, and I recognize that. It's a prioritization of what do we want to focus on. Infrastructure and culverts and streets and projects, absolutely. But then once these years roll off and you've now created more capacity for your debt to income ratio, we could turn around and say, new elementary school. That's the kind of thing I will go into debt for, especially if it happens to be in a certain precinct in my district. So yes, just slightly, I'm trying to nudge us. You can't turn the Titanic right away, inch by inch by inch. I think this gets us there, and sorry for hogging up so much time.
Ms. Timmer?
One of the primary concerns as I've started looking back over the budget history is the question of, are we expanding our debt service to capacity? And Ms. Witt has reminded us a number of times of the pig and the snake and the time that it takes to digest large projects. And so as we are in that trend, my concern is that it forces us to constantly increase taxes in order to accommodate the debt service. So I'm largely favorable to what Mr. Feraldi is bringing forward. I don't know that those specific rates are sustainable, but I'm not opposed to a tariff type approach in addressing debt service with alternate revenue streams. But piggybacking what was?
Oh, I just said under my breath, which is why they phase out.
Yeah, and I'm tracking with that. I just don't, I'd have to look at those components of it. But I do want to bring back to the table what Mr. Deemer is bringing up is we have to tighten spending. and we have to tighten spending on the CIP side, and we have to tighten spending on the operational side. And if we lose sight of that, I think we're going to derail this train altogether. That, I think, is first and foremost in the nature of our discussions. The alternate revenue streams that both of these gentlemen are bringing up is huge. We've all spoken about priorities. Ms. Reed brought up priorities in regards to how are we going to use the one-time funding and what is our priority moving forward? Is it the deferred maintenance aspects? Is it some of these capital improvement projects? I would advocate for the deferred maintenance component, but those are the three areas that I see us talking about. Where are we going to cut? Where are alternate forms of revenue, especially if we want to tackle this debt service idea, and I like that. And then where are our priorities moving forward? And Mr. Feraldi had brought up some of the private partnership potential, and I've reached out to some of you. I've reached out to you, Dr. Wilder. I think there are a lot of opportunities for private partnerships that expand our outreach into the community, keep things cost effective, if not more effective than what the city can offer those services at when it comes to Miller Park Pool. I would like to move the libraries into community centers potentially, or explore that to see if it can be outward facing in the communities with computer labs. What are some of these creative ideas that we can look at as far as how we can restructure some of these services and drive down not only CIP or capital improvement, but operational costs? So those are the, I guess I said three, but four things that I would bring to the table as far as our discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got one question since we're talking about, because I do believe that we need to reduce spending in our operational budget. But one in particular. So this is from the adopted FY 2025 budget, right, that we approved. And it shows 10 FTEs in the Department of Communications and Public Engagement for this fiscal year that we're in. So we adopted and approved 10 FTEs. But in the pay spreadsheet that was provided to me with all the salaries of all the city employees, and then also in the directory on city notes, there's 15 FTEs currently in the current fiscal year in communications and public engagement. So I'm curious, how does that reconcile when we approve, city council approves 10 FTEs, but we're paying for 15?
I'm not sure what you have there, but there was an effort that was taken up this past year, and I'm sorry, I'm under the weather a little bit, so if you see me get up and down, I apologize. Don't know what that's about. But what we found when we did a communications audit is that there were some departments who had a public information officer and others that didn't, right? And that, for example, Public Works didn't have anybody that supported it. And so we actually moved PIOs that were in other departments into communications to centralize communications, right? So that we're not expanding, you want to make sure Donna gets it. We're not expanding 10 to 15, I'm not sure, but I know we used existing people who were already in other departments and moved them into communications so as to ensure that they could grow their portfolios, things to do that. I don't know if that answers your question necessarily, but that's what we've done.
Well, my question is, what's the approval authority when we, as city council, approve 10 FTEs for a department, and then we have 15 FTEs in the department that we're paying for? Where's the approval authority on that?
It's personnel, so it's me moving what I would say is existing employees in other departments into one department. So that would be something that's an efficiency. That's looking at making sure that, like I said, the easiest one I can use is the Recreation, Parks, and Open Space Public Information Officer, who had one department, now has several, right? So it's an efficiency. So it would be my personnel, my moving and restructure the organization to create an efficient, not unlike how I did with 911, moving that underneath the police department, finding that there's a better efficiency there.
But I think the charter gives the authority to create and structure offices to city council. And that's why I'm asking that question is how do we go from 10 FTEs to 15 FTEs? And have any of these FTEs come across from any other funds? Like, did we move any enterprise fund FTEs into the general fund?
We
Yeah,
have one.
one.
Yeah, we took one from Water Resources and moved it to Communications to do their public engagement and that type of thing, but that person's also going to do more work than just Water Resources. And then that'll be funded partially by our indirect cost program because, for the work that they do in an enterprise fund. So that you'll see a reduction of one person out of Water Resources because we moved to Communications. But Water Resources will still be paying for that person through the indirect cost program.
But I don't think that was brought to us and we didn't vote on that, correct? I mean, I guess that's something you.
As long as there's no new FTEs created, typically it does not require council approval.
So that's what I was gonna know, Councilmember Mischins, if council in the past has created the position, as long as the funding stays where it needs to, personnel and where they work and what they do would be under the manager.
But they just said that they moved somebody from an enterprise fund across to the general fund. So we're talking about moving FTEs from enterprise funds to general fund departments. I'm just,
With the funding coming from the enterprise
so are
fund.
we, so is it like a transfer
Through a
or
cost allocation.
something?
Yeah, so they're going to, the enterprise fund will receive the service, and then the general fund will charge back the cost of that service to the,
You can go ahead and wave.
yeah.
There you go.
And this is him, this is Jason Snyder.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not looking at names, I'm
Yeah.
just looking at
No, no,
numbers.
sure.
Because when I look at the sheet and then I'm looking at the different departments and the number of people in the departments, and I go back and I look at the budget and I see 10 in the budget and then 15 on payroll, that to me is a red flag, right? And that's something, that I think it's, and I'd like you to maybe research the charter and the city code on that to see if we're doing it. Just because we've been doing something a certain way doesn't necessarily mean we're doing it the way we're supposed to be doing it, right? So.
Sure, and again, what I come back to is an efficiency, right? You asked me to run the organization, and I've structurally made sure that departments who had no information officer, nobody that could communicate for them now has that. So it's even better, it's a more efficient way to go. And so no new FTEs, no anything, so, and it was personnel, and so that's where I did, and welcome Matt to look at it as well. But I think it's a good thing. I'm excited about it.
Where'd the 4 dispatcher positions go?
4 dispatcher positions.
Yeah, so the personnel summary in the general fund shows that there were 4 dispatcher positions from E911 eliminated. Do we know where they went?
Not offhand, I think 2 went into
One went to IT.
police.
Yeah, one went to IT.
Was that like they applied for an IT position kind of a thing? And
There are vacancies.
Vacancies that hadn't been filled, and we had needs, and candidly, in a budget like what we proposed, I proposed 1 new position. That's because the state required me to do so, and so it's using existing FTEs to meet the needs at the time.
Sure.
And so some of that is just the enormity that's going to be the new police headquarters, and we needed an IT person to help kind of staff that for us over at the police department.
Ms. Reed?
what's that? I'm good. I think, I'm curious about why those 4 E911 dispatcher positions went away.
It's like what I said, because I proposed in my first year 5 new FTEs in E911. They weren't filled. We were carrying quite a few
So we
vacancies.
haven't been able to get them filled.
No, sir. And over time, and working with Ryan and figuring out how best to place those, or where they were better used, work with him. So this isn't anything that I didn't work with the department head, work with them about what could be done. So they've got sufficient staffing, all that they need, and these positions were then needed in other areas that we just candidly don't have.
And I'd be curious to see what, with the exception of public safety, what a hiring freeze would look like and what that would do for us.
It would make it, I mean, I can tell you exactly what it would do. It would, unless we stopped doing certain services and we moved those people that were remaining, that were still employed into other services where we lost folks, then our ability to provide the current level of service would diminish, and we would just end up providing the city services that our residents expect less and less efficiently.
Over time, if it were to continue, correct? So like whatever the
But once you
snapshot of
do a
time is.
hiring freeze, then you got to find new money to be able to unfreeze those positions, right? So a hiring freeze delays the inevitable, which is a permanent reduction of some sort of service. You do a hiring freeze if you're entering into a time when you've adopted a budget and all of a sudden the revenues that you've projected you get updated projections and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, we're not going to meet our budget. So how do we make sure we meet our budget in that fiscal year? Well, you do a hiring freeze because you've got an immediate issue that you've got to address. But if we're looking at a hiring freeze as a budgeting strategy, it creates massive difficulties for us to be able to deliver services going into the future, and it's much more efficient and effective to identify services that we shouldn't be providing and eliminate them.
I'd love to do that.
Because that way, you're not hollowing out the organization, and we're still able to provide the services that everyone agrees are priority services at a high level. What we don't want to do is hollow out the organization to the point where we do everything poorly.
Sure. And I think that kind of falls into the exact strategy that you guys took with the E911, right? You haven't been able to fill those 4 positions. So you moved them where you could get use out of them, where you needed them, right? So my question, and I look at these reports that they do, I try to catch them, every other month or so. They do these human resources reports for Lynchburg City Schools, for the school board, that are unbelievable. We're not getting anything like that. It shows them on an ongoing basis where they're at with positions, how many people have left, how many people have retired, and it kind of gives that ongoing snapshot of the workforce, right? Which is our biggest expense on the operation side, clearly. So what I'm curious about is what other positions potentially are out there. If we had 4 positions that we haven't been able to fill in 911, and you essentially eliminated them, you moved them somewhere else, right? Are there any other positions like that that haven't been filled in other departments that we haven't been able to fill? We might be able to do the same thing. And I know you might be the only one in the room, I think, that would know about this. But in the past, didn't we also do a buyout for people that were eligible to retire?
A long time ago, I can think of once in my tenure, and I will tell you, the wrong people retired.
When you say the wrong,
What the intention was to either fill their position with a lower paid person, because they'd be
Sure.
young, they'd be starting in at the beginning, but what we found out is there were people that retired from critical positions that, because they had been here so long, to fill their position, we almost had to pay them as much. So,
But-
because of how the salaries worked at the time. So
Sure.
it didn't really benefit us the way that we intended. But again, it's been 20 years? It's been a long time.
is that an option that we could explore?
It is an option we can explore.
And the reason I ask that question is because when I look at the payroll, we got 100 people on payroll that are soaking up, and then it looks to me, I'm just looking at 25 years, people that have been here at least 25 years, right? And they're also, well over 10% of the entire payroll, right? So,
What I would caution you
I'm
is,
curious about what option is there, and if there's an option for people that, maybe it's like, they're looking for they're not retiring, but maybe if the right incentive was there for them to retire. It also gives opportunity to bring in new leadership in some places, right? Is there something with one-time funds that would be an option for us, especially looking at that fund balance, right? To potentially incentivize people?
but you can't, the way we've had to balance the budget for 25 and 26 is we accounted for $2 million in vacancy funds.
Sure.
So you got to be careful. You can't do too many things because your budget's not gonna balance. So you can't lower the workforce and still think you're gonna meet your vacancy budget. So there's just some balancing there that's gotta happen.
And I go back to, if you want to do a voluntary retirement incentive program to create some cultural change in the organization and open up leadership opportunities to younger folks, then maybe, although my experience has been what Donna's has been, which is the wrong people leave. The people who are, the people who are already bringing the right culture end up leaving. It's not a long-term saving strategy, because you're not going to pay the new people likely any less than you're paying the people who have left. If you're looking for savings strategies, long-term, that are sustainable saving strategies are doing less things, right? And that's, we can try to get away from that as much as we want to, but the only long-term sustainable saving strategy is doing fewer things, because what we need to commit to is doing the things that are important extraordinarily well.
And that's why at the beginning of the year, I asked for, what are we required to do, right? What does state law and federal law require us to do, right? Those should always be our priorities. If there's a mandate or requirement from either the charter, state or federal law for us to do something, we got to do it, and we should do it well. What are the things that we've committed to doing? What are the regional agreements, partnerships, whatever, the things that we've entered into, like the Central Virginia Regional Radio Board or the Region 2000, even though that is what that is. Those agreements that we've entered into and committed to, that should be the next thing. And then after that, everything else is what we should be looking at. And if we had a way to classify that in the budget, looking at what's the required things that we got to do first, always, right? And these are the services that we've got to do and execute to a high level, right? And then everything else, we should consider, do we really need to have that at that level, or do we need to have that at that capacity, or do we need to have it at all?
If you remember, Mr. Mischins, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was Timmer or Vice Mayor Deemer. Remember those stack of cards that I had given you guys as an exercise as to, kind of sort those? And because what's interesting is there's probably what I think about what those services look like, and then there's what your populace thinks about the things that you should do too. And those are those hard ones to kind of define. But I understand where you're coming from.
But I'm not talking about anything other than what's mandated. So starting with what's mandated, we can't touch it, right? We had a conversation the other day about the police department, and how the counties only have to have a sheriff's office. We have to have a police department because the charter says we have to have a police department, right? So, there's mandates for certain things. It's not, we have to get out of this realm of thinking like, here's the stack of cards, let's see what the majority of people like or want. No, there is very clear, the state says this, the charter says this, the federal government says this. We need to identify at all times what those services are, and we got to execute at a high level because we're required to do them. And we need to also know, when we're looking at services or programs, if they're not mandated, if they're not required, if we've not committed with any other agreement to do these things, grant obligations, regional partnerships, whatever it is, then that should always be the first thing that we look at when we're looking at raising the burden on our citizens, is shedding off the things that we just don't need to do.
Ms. Reed?
So I just want to clarify for the public what a council manager form of government means. While it does mean that we appoint 3 positions, our city attorney, our clerk of council, and our city manager. Our city manager is over all of the city employees. In this case, that is Mr. Winter Benda. He has complete authority over all city employees. He does not have to report to all council members for every move that he makes with his employees. He only has to come to us out of courtesy or if he is making any changes to the budget that we've adopted. So if he wants to move around chess pieces in his sandbox, as he references many times, he's allowed to do so. So if we approved 10 employees and he managed the money that we approved and he was able to stretch that to 15 because there was a need, he did not have to come to us for approval. The insinuation that somehow he did something unethical is really unfortunate and inappropriate. We won't have to do a hiring freeze, y'all, because the number of city employees that will naturally walk out is inevitable because of the treatment of our staff. It is unbelievable how our staff is talked to, talked down to, the emails that we witness. I'm tired of it. We have got to treat this staff with the respect that they are owed and quit making accusatory comments. We have the leader of our city here as far as the city management is concerned. And he is owed respect and not made to sound like he's done something unethical. We have staff that are only hanging on by a thread because they have families they have to feed, because of what is done behind closed doors, through emails, and even in public. I don't know who has joy talking down to people in front of people, embarrassing people on camera in front of their subordinates. It's inappropriate. We are better than that. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm sorry. I'm going to defend our staff. I did it when I was mayor. I'm going to do it now. And I am sorry on Mr. Bennett's behalf that he was accused or anything was insinuated tonight, because he explained himself and he shouldn't have had to do it. And if that was a concern prior to tonight, then that could have been done in a private conversation or in an email exchange. Because we sell things to the citizens and we do it on camera to make people question the acts of our fellow council members, our city staff, and put doubts in their mind. They watched it on TV. They watched you do it. It's not they saw you. There's nothing to question here. It's inappropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Deemer.
I know we're getting long in the tooth here, and it's probably starting to show in our dispositions. I was planning on using my last comments to praise my fellow councilman on the civility and the congeniality of what we had done tonight. I really was pleased until the last comments. I don't think that matched the tone of the rest of it. As far as what Mr. Councilman Mischins said, I didn't take it as accusatory towards you. I thought it was a legitimate question, and I appreciated him asking it, and I appreciated the civil way that you answered it. And I really was hoping that this would continue, and I want us to be civil. I think we had some great discussions tonight on the budget, and the best we've had so far, I'd have to say, Mr. Mayor. We actually dealt with some pretty heavy issues, and we haven't dealt with the pools and the libraries and the other big projects that are out there, but I know that's coming at some point, and I know we all have our own priorities and emotions get high, but I think it's very important that we do treat each other with civility and kindness, and I hope we can try to stick with that as best we can going forward. Budgets are controversial things, even in our household, when we, as the head of our homes, have discussions with our significant others about how we're going to spend the money coming up. It can get a little heated in people's houses, and I understand that. That's good. That's what I call robust debate, and that is our job. That's what we're highly paid to do. So I'm okay with it. I just don't want to make it personal or anything, and I don't think anything that was said was meant to be personal against you. I, for one, wanted to commend you on the facial hair changes. I think it looks great. Mr. Benda, you've done an excellent job giving us information. I do have a question on the emergency communication, if somebody can get back to me on this. I'm looking at the flow chart for public safety, and I see 33 positions for Emergency Communications Center. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, so maybe somebody after this is over with can help me understand the disparity in the numbers, because that's not even the numbers that Mr. Misjuns had about, but maybe I'm just looking at the wrong thing. So again, thank you, everybody, for the participation.
Mr. Wilder was.
Look forward to continuing this.
Thank you. Mrs. Councilmember Reed kind of touched most of my thoughts. At some point, become micromanaging our staff. And I don't think nobody really wants to do that. We need to have respect for our staff, for understanding for our staff, respect them for their tenure and what they're bringing to our table, bringing to our city. If you move one person or two people, I don't think we need to get into those weeds. I think there need to be a discussion that the city manager has with his staff. I think we take on more duty than we are authorized to do, and it gets to become micromanaging, and I just don't care for that. But that's my personal opinion. That's your opinion of that. As far as the second point I want to make, as far as the community centers, the CDBG funds, we renovated most of the community centers, I believe, all over the city. And at that time, I believe most of them had computer labs, if I'm not mistaken. But we can talk with Parks and Rec. But I think when they did the renovations, most of them had computer labs already that they utilized. Other point is, we talk about kicking the can down the road. Again, because we have an aging city, we have an old city, we have a lot of infrastructure needs. So we've, like I said, when I was on the school board 20 almost years ago, we were trying to build Sandusky. So again, during that time period, they've kicked that can down the road. We can always keep kicking the can down the road. So at some point, that's why we have to do debt funding, because so many issues are in our city, because you have a 100-plus-year-old sewer system. You're going to have so many issues in an aging city like in Lynchburg, one of the first cities. So you're going to have a lot of challenges in the old city with requirements to do that. So that's why we must continue to invest in our city, because we have a lot of infrastructure needs and millions of dollars in the capital projects doesn't list everything that needs to be done. I mean, it's millions and millions of dollars. Again, a couple of years ago, they showed us, I mean, it was like $1 billion, I don't know how much, it was it was a whole lot of funds that was needed because of the infrastructure needs of the aging city. And the last point, just as I said earlier, as a possible compromise, again, maybe looking at 80, if I can get some thoughts on what's the 80-cent tax rate look like, 80-cent tax rate, and then increase in some of those other, I like to keep the capital project budgets the way it is, with all the funding for pools and libraries, and keep those funding the way it is. But if we could do an 80 cents tax rate, and then pull the fund, those lost in funds and revenue from other sources, whether it's mills tax or real estate tax, not real estate, whether it's a lodging tax, whatever, or the dollar, whatever rate it is, if we could just kind of get a combination of those kind of things to something that the city is comfortable with, that they feel comfortable in suggesting that wouldn't hurt our hotel industry, that wouldn't hurt our restaurant industry, that would be more of a compromise that everyone could live with and be still meet the request from our taxpayers and meet, everybody has a win-win if we do something of that nature. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the passion and the emotion, Ms. Reed. But, the question which, saw the city attorney taking notes on was actually for him, because it's very clear what the powers enumerated say in Section 38 of our charter. And it says that city council has the power to, right here, paragraph 28, division of government and departments, creation of offices to divide the administrative work of the city into such departments as the council in its judgment may deem proper and to appoint. And then it makes a list, and it talks about appointing assistants and clerks and all of those things with it. So it's a question, it's a legitimate question. Again, I appreciate the passion and the emotion with which you try to defend staff, but I do think that we've got to remain objective. We make better decisions when we approach things logically with objectivity than if we just try to be emotional about every little thing. And I think that'll really help us if we focus on maintaining that. In addition to that, somebody's got to hold staff accountable. That's city council. That's our job. Our job is oversight, accountability. That's what the citizens elect us to do. They don't elect us to rubber stamp everything that staff brings to us. They don't elect us to just sit here and see a presentation and vote yes every time. So that's that, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari.
We need to keep this moving forward.
Yes.
My request is not unlike Dr. Wilder's. My request is that council take a poll about the idea that I've proposed. This is not a vote. I will say it on camera as many times as I need to. This is not a vote. This is a request for Tuesday to have our votes lined up for Tuesday on the budget, real estate rates, various ordinances that this concept would require. And at the same time, with respect to Dr. Wilder's request, I would ask that for both the 76 and the 80, just so council's aware, and out of respect for his request of that, I lean towards the 76, but we'll leave that for Tuesday. But that would be my request to keep this moving forward, is to take this concept that has been shared and request it for Tuesday, and then also in a memo outline, this is what it would look like, this is the resolution, this is the impacts on the, just outline all of it for the public and ourselves, so we know for next week what it looks like, because the manager needs to know where we're going. And I think that's where I'm at.
Ms. Timmer?
Piggybacking what Mr. Frawley said, but there's been discussion about a special meeting to request the rate, or to discuss the rate more directly and have a vote on the rate before the reading of the budget. I would like us to set a time for that.
Mr. Mayor. This council member will not vote on a rate absent understanding the full picture, because I, quite frankly, don't trust some of the folks on this dais when it comes to what the impacts would be and where they want to go. So for me, we do this all in one swing, just like we did in 2020, fiscal 25, I believe.
We didn't have to reset a rate. There was no reassessments.
Well,
So-
okay. I still have the floor, everyone, but appreciate that. I'm not saying this is absent of discussion. I'm asking for another opportunity to have this discussion before the reading of the budget. So I don't think that's contrary to anything that you're putting forward.
Mr. Mayor? In interest of us having more discussion and hopefully setting a rate, I would like to make a motion that we have a special meeting with the purpose of having additional discussion. I want to hear back on Mr. Frawley's proposal
Yeah.
details and how it will impact hotels, Airbnbs, all the aforementioned lodging organizations, because I'm not even sure what the universe is of lodging. I want to know what that means.
Point of order.
Yeah.
We can't make a motion unless we actually have a supermajority vote
To agenda.
to then make your motion. And I will tell you this, and I got to email you back, that's the first thing that needs to get eliminated from the rule of procedure. It's the most ridiculous thing that's ever been put on. But so the point of order is that we can't make a motion right now to vote for a special meeting, because the rules of procedure require us to actually make a motion to vote on something and have a supermajority adopt that, and then we can go to your motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if I may, the way to get what Kurt is describing is to have the mayor call a meeting. I mean, he can do that. Just get with
Or
staff.
two of us, too.
Or
right?
two of us. Just get with staff, figure it out between now and Tuesday, and we're set. I mean, it's not that complicated. Secondly, that part of the language was written because some members of council were abusing the privilege of bringing up ideas and motions on the fly when none of us had a chance to review or understand where it was coming from. It was abused left and right. So it was intentionally written in there because of that very reason. So we have flexibility,
So to restrict debate.
we have opportunity, and I'm not gonna buy into opportunities to get into a back and forth, but I'm gonna just submit, those are our options, and we can do what we need to do.
Ms. Reed?
I would ask that you would consider, Mayor, if you're going to call the special meeting, that you would do it for Monday, the 12th, because I have a son graduating from college on Friday, and we have pretty much events going on Thursday through the week, and it's Mother's Day weekend. So if you would consider Monday, that would be ideal.
Okay. Ms. Timmer?
I wanted to ask if there are further slides, because I was getting ready to move to adjourn, but I'll let you go, Dr. Wilder, and I'm favorable as long as there is a meeting before Tuesday.
If, I know Dr. Weil wants to speak, if I can interject quickly. The concept of an equalized rate without meeting the objectives that I've campaigned for, paying teachers more, firefighters, cops, dollars to schools, I don't even want to take a look at it. It turns me off more than anything politically. So unless you guys want to view that, be my guest. This council should not adopt that budget at all, so we shouldn't even consider it, which is why I tried to come up with ideas.
Mr. Wilder?
I would just say, can we just do it all on Tuesday at the regular scheduled meeting? Thank you.
Mr. Mission?
I would suggest that we have a special meeting. I'm in support of that. And then I believe, depending on the outcome of the special meeting, that we amend the budget calendar as appropriate. Depending on the outcome of a special meeting, that we would amend the budget calendar as appropriate.
So, I'm sorry, can I ask a question to that?
Yes, ma'am.
So can we not just have our meeting on Tuesday then, and then just amend the budget calendar?
And Mayor?
Like, do we have to call a special? If you're amenable to amending the budget calendar, then can we not have just our regular meeting on the 13th? See what gets done?
I'm
and then-
okay with the meeting on the 13th. I'm not okay with the first reading of the budget on the 13th.
Yeah,
So.
right, so we could push it, that's what I'm saying.
So the budget calendar, while I understand what you said at the public hearing, I am not comfortable with this council not deciding on amending or moving the budget calendar and just leaving it up to walking into the first reading of the budget on the 13th. I'm not comfortable with that. I'd be happy to have a discussion about the tax rate, any other options and things like that on Tuesday, and making decisions on that, but I do not want it to be the first reading of the budget on Tuesday.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Paul.
Mr. Ferrari?
Quite frankly, Marty, I'm not comfortable with you on this council. I'm just going to be honest.
Point of order.
Point of order.
There's nothing inappropriate about that. That is a fact
Okay.
that I'm stating. All right, so here's where I'm coming
So
from.
that means there's nothing inappropriate about
Here's what I'm
this.
coming from. Here's where I'm coming from. If we vote to set the rate at 2:31 PM and then adopt the budget at 2:33 PM, procedurally, we have no issue. I mean, there's not a problem, guys. We're creating problems to cause this to fall apart. That's really what I see this as. If we have a special meeting, independent, before, it gives more time, more opportunity to find reasons why this falls apart. You have the same amount of time to come up with why you don't think this should work.
So you're against the special meeting?
I'm against it because, quite frankly, yes, Mr. Mayor, I do not believe that I can entertain this type of conversation in good faith. It should be done in the same day procedurally, as we always have.
It's not as we always do.
Okay, let's take a vote on having the budget meeting and set the
We
rate.
can't vote, Mr. Mayor. That's the point of
Oh,
order.
that's it. That's it.
I guess what I'd offer, Mr. Mayor, certainly if you want to get a poll, you could do an informal poll to see if there's a desire to do a special meeting, to amend the budget calendar, to proceed as we currently are scheduled for the first reading on May 13th. This council always has the option, too, to suspend its rules of procedure in
Yes.
instances
Yes.
where it believes it does need to make a decision. The only reason that language was put in there, as I recall, it was to prevent surprise motions and to allow staff to be able to appropriately prepare for matters that were brought before them so they'd be educated and could brief council as they needed to. But that is an option if a majority here wants to do that.
Ms. Timmer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things. I like Mrs. Reed's proposal as far as Tuesday and pushing the budget calendar. With that, you did say on WLNI that you were willing to call a special meeting and that you would call a special meeting because my understanding of that was the recognition that there needs to be discussion about the rate before we're reading the budget. And that's pretty common sense. It doesn't shut down anything that Mr. Feraldi's saying. I like the nature of his proposal. I want to hear more about it. And I think we've had a pretty good faith discussion about it today until we all got snarky and need to go eat something. So I think that Tuesday would be great. And then we can just push the budget calendar back a little bit.
I ate a cookie, I'm fine. But just
wasn't-
wanted to let you know that I was wondering, could we just have the follow-up discussion during our work session and then vote on the rate at the 7 o'clock? I mean, is there anything happening in the work session on Tuesday that couldn't be delayed or pushed off?
That negates the whole purpose.
To the point of making it the budget work session and continuing our discussion that we want to finish here so that we could still be on track for adopting the rate.
I think the only thing staff might run into is if for some reason council changed gears and did something different, they would have very limited time to go and make those changes before 7 o'clock. So I know I'm speaking against my own concept, but I mean, I'm trying to be honest. So the idea that I'm recommending is take a poll about the concept, the direction we're going, have staff prepare it, have that be on the agenda for Tuesday, and consider it. And then we just start voting.
Ms. Timmer.
Straightforward.
Thank you. Mrs. Reed, I'm sorry, that wasn't to be a personal slight of you in any way. I'm referring more so of my own hunger at this current situation and just the general tenor of the room. So, yes, thank you. But with what Mr. Feraldi is saying, I'm fine with taking a poll. I'm fine with general direction. But again, then we need to have discussion on what's presented. And so adding a step in the process that has typically been there, I believe would be really valuable in this situation. And it's been largely recognized that that would be valuable to have that step of an extra discussion regarding the rates specifically before we're getting into the adoption of the budget.
So would a consensus require us having to suspend the rules of procedure?
No, I think because this is a work session like any other matter, you could give direction to staff as to how you wanted to proceed at our next meeting.
Okay, so maybe, Mayor, could you maybe ask for consensus if council was amenable to a 6 PM special meeting on Monday?
Monday?
So
Ish.
so that would that be a third, like a work session, a special meeting, and then a council meeting? Is that what we're talking about?
So it would be to resume this conversation to see what staff would come back with the 76 and 80.
80.
With Councilman Feraldi's proposal with the adjustments, with the consumption taxes increased for us to discuss, and then we would still have our meeting on the 13th, depending what comes out of that, with the staying on track with the budget calendar. In hopes that we could come to a decision.
There's, if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
do you think that we got enough time to get the information on the lodging tax stuff and the ambulance service fees and the other things that we discussed? I'm just asking. I've been saying this since the public hearing. I wanted to give you guys as much time as possible. And I wanted to prevent you guys from being backed into a corner, but now it feels like we're being backed into a corner. So that's the question I have is do we have the capacity and the bandwidth over Mother's Day weekend to do this? Or is it reasonable to say, you know what, let's push back the budget calendar 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it would be? You know, I mean, it's kind of, I don't think that's unreasonable either. I just, you know, we're trying to cram information, you know, this is, it's kind of interesting because we talk about process and procedure and this, that, and the other, and then we get hit with this plan of having literally the highest lodging tax in Virginia without even hearing from the people that it's going to impact. So,
I would say this, and it's just a note on that one comment. I do think if we were to increase fees connected to the lodging tax or otherwise, there may be a public hearing requirement connected to that. So I've been taking, you know, some pretty good notes just to check into these various issues.
yeah, I'm really concerned about that. It's, because that would also probably include, you know, the short-term rental owner population as well. So that's a large group of folks in our city who would be impacted by something like this. I'm not comfortable with just jumping into this. I would prefer if we just, you know, if, I'm okay with not having a special meeting if we move that budget calendar back by 2 weeks at a minimum. That's where I'm at. And I'm curious to see what the city manager thinks about that.
It's the same place that I was 2 weeks ago as far as the politics of the room. Staff's gonna be there for you, right? We're gonna hustle, whatever it is that you decide. Now, pushing, going forward, whatever you decide. Yeah, there's a lot of effort, a lot of work that would go into figuring out the things that you've asked, but this is what we do. And so I leave it to council, because what I don't want to do is get into the space of the politics of things. If you want to move it out, I think I told you, because my thing was the 30 days and by the end of the calendar year and all that. That's my concern, is whether or not I'm in trouble with Governor Youngkin. I won't be. I think we figured that out. It just, where does the body want to go?
And now I think with the information that you might have to research public hearings and things of that nature, I think, I mean, do you see less liability for us to extend 2 weeks, or is it, you know, just to make sure we're dotting all our i's and
No,
crossing our t's?
The only thing I was going to check into is, you know, the limits that are applicable to the transient occupancy tax and fees. You know, I'm not familiar with ambulance services fee, so I do need to get with staff about that and talk through that. But, you know, I'll hustle as you all need, you know, but if we do have a public hearing requirement with any of those, it would have to in some way push it back, or we'd have to do a special or something to hold that.
I guess the question I have is, would it help you guys if you knew going into Mother's Day weekend, you know what, we're buying 2 more weeks? Would that help?
I don't know how to answer.
I mean, objectively, I'm
Can we
asking
be
you
ready
your
by
feelings.
Tuesday or not?
We do good work, and we can hustle. We can do, like what you said, hustle. Now, there is Mother's Day. There is plenty of things that are happening. Again, I also just don't want to get sideways with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just putting it out there. You know, it's been a pretty cool budget season with lots of stuff. Vice Mayor Deemer said something. He said, "You got a hard job." I think you said at some point. I like that. It is, and so right now, I want to be responsive. I want to make sure that people are getting what they need, and I also want to make sure that the 7 of you agree about how best to move forward. So to answer practically, sure, more time helps. With that said, I also want to meet this body where it is, because maybe tomorrow somebody else wants it faster, or not faster, or more immediate, or that kind of thing. I just trying to be helpful as best I can. And so in that, I just, we will do whatever we need, and what we've done, we will continue to do. But I know this, we're not going to go in any more slides today. Just recognizing the room. What is it, read the room? No more.
So if it would help, then the staff, then that's where I stand, is that I think just pushing it back 2 weeks would be ideal for me. That's where I'm at.
For the vote.
I don't think we're gonna vote.
No,
but
no.
Pushing the budget calendar
Yeah,
back
the
2
budget,
weeks,
yes.
gives them more time, give
Yes.
everybody time to absorb all the information.
We'll discuss on
Coming
Tuesday. And within 2 weeks, we'll have another meeting
To try to adopt the budget.
to adopt the budget.
That would be the first reading.
First reading, and then we'll adopt. Yes, ma'am. Hold on.
Just plain, want to make sure I understand. So 13th, work session, discussion, what have you. Then the first reading is the fourth Tuesday in May or the second Tuesday in June? What are we talking about?
Fourth Tuesday.
Fourth Tuesday in May. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And then we still have a meeting on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yep, 7 o'clock.
Anything else you need, Mr. Winter?
Love and mercy and grace. No, I think we're tracking. I think we've got some ideas. I heard 80, and I heard 76.7. That's where we are. There's some about the ambulance and some other different stuff. So I think we've got some good notes. And if we miss something, it may be myself, Greg, or somebody else that might follow up with each of you just to make sure that we got everything right.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
So, real quick, Councilman Shins, I'm sorry if I came off emotional. I've been described as emotional a lot in meetings recently by you guys. And so, I am emotional because I am a protective woman. And so I do have emotional responses, and I'm not apologetic for that because I defend people when I feel like they've been wronged. But I'm sorry that I was a little aggressive towards you because I just felt like it was an inappropriate start off to things. And so I did want to defend our city manager. But I apologize if I got a little aggressive in my tone towards you. Please forgive me. I do want us to have cordial exchanges amongst each other, and so I do ask your forgiveness. I hope you understand where that emotion comes from. I am just a protective person when I feel like someone that I care about, and I do care about our staff. I had very close relationships with all these people for 2 years, and I know them very well. The mayor is getting to know that now himself. You get to know them on very personal levels, and I respect them very much. So that was where that was coming from. I hope you understand.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mission.
If I may. Apology accepted, you are forgiven.
Thank you.
All right.
And I would just, the question that I ask you, Mr. Mayor, and, maybe the room in general is, should we vote, suspend the rules and vote on amending this budget, or do it by consensus? Would that be the same effect
I
if we
think
do
it'd
it by
be the
consensus?
same effect. I think staff and I will follow your lead. So if the majority here is agreeable to what Mr. Benda had described to you, that's what we'll do.
I think we can do it by consensus.
I'm good with that.
Everybody good? See, here's bobbing. Yep.
And I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Next meeting is Tuesday,